Recording in progress.
Call to order the Tuesday, August 23rd, 2022 Town Council Committee of the Whole to order at 6:31. All councilors are present with the exception of Councilor McBride, who should be arriving shortly. Calendar and Communications, Councilor Kassiri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. So I just wanted to start this evening and share a little story. On Thursday, my family and I went out to dinner to celebrate my son's summer orchestra program concert. We went out to a local Groton restaurant, and this very kind man came over and had made my kids a paper airplane. And he asked my husband and I if he could make a second one, so they each had one. And we thanked him for his kindness, and he gave us a pamphlet and explained that the group that he was with at the restaurant had their monthly meeting, and he wanted to share the organization with us. So he gave us a pamphlet highlighting the Southeast Connecticut Community Center of the Blind. It's located in New London, but they serve all of southeastern Connecticut. They serve the social, recreational, educational, referral, and advocacy needs of the blind and visually impaired of southeastern Connecticut, and assist them in attaining and maintaining an independent lifestyle. They do events here in Groton and Mystic, and they are doing a Meet the Blind fair at Williams Park in New London on Saturday from 10 to 2, where they're going to be doing a demonstration of using a white cane, working with a seeing eye dog, and reading and writing in Braille. And I just wanted to educate our community of this essential organization, and I'm very glad to have met the kind man who gifted us paper airplanes, but also educated me on this great group that benefits members of our town. On Friday, I stopped in to watch the unveiling of the Joey Gingerella plaque at the Calvin Burrows Field concession stand with Councilors Franco and Parker. Community Speaks Out sponsored a movie night at the field and was also educating young members of our community about addiction. And I received various communications regarding Park Place, short-term rentals, Brantford Manor, the Laurelwood Light issue, a thank you from Always Home, a thank you from the Sexual Assault Crisis Center of Eastern Connecticut, Inc., a flyer for Groton Overdose Awareness Day, which is August 31st, and a link to a great highlight from the National Police Foundation study called Small and Rural Agency Crisis Response, a National Survey and Case Studies. Groton was highlighted for their crisis intervention trained model of policing. And as the chief pointed out, we are only heading in the right direction by adding our community outreach specialists. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Westervelt.
Good evening, everyone. This past week or so, I've had quite a few emails regarding the short-term rentals, as well as property reuse committee and the Laurelwood light trespass issue. Also participated in the property reuse committee with Councilor McBride and Councilor Bordelon. That's all.
Thank you. Councilor Bordelon.
Thank you. First, I just want to say good luck to all the Groton students heading back to school next week. So this time next week, everybody will, well, at least the high school, I believe the first phase will be starting. But so it's always an exciting time, and just encouraging folks to, remember that there are bus stops and young children that do not know their routes or bus stops, and just be mindful when we're rushing to work, and just, slow down and consider that, children are back on the roads, and we need to be mindful that, it's the first day, and that things are a little chaotic. So with that, I've had the pleasure of being part of the high school marching band as a parent, so they're kicking off, and I'm excited to start to attend those events. And as many know, the Fitch High School band will be attending they'll be playing at Pearl Harbor in, I think, March or April. So stay tuned. Tons of fundraisers out there to help these kids go. It's not going to be a cheap trip, but I think it's really awesome that they're going to get to play at such a historical place. And as the submarine capital of the world, it's an honor to see our Groton band go down with many military dependents and families on there. So really exciting for that. As it was stated, the communications by other counselors, I did receive those as well. As it was stated, I did attend the Property Reuse Committee meeting with the other two counselors. I also attended the Tenants Unit, Brantford Manor's Tenants Unit meeting, where things were discussed about the ongoing concerns, the slow process and repairs, no real plan in place, and just overall frustration and overwhelmed with the fact that school is starting, and there are currently tenants that are living in hotels, and are concerned for the welfare and well-being and mental health of their children who will be having to possibly catch the bus from a hotel. So again, I encourage, anybody out there that wants to get involved and help with the process in Brantford. There's a lot of concerns. The things that I heard at that meeting are not just mold, it's the slow process with repairs in general. So I encourage more folks to get involved. And I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Over the last week, I had the great pleasure of attending the Pride prom, which was put on by the DEI committee, and it was right here in this room. We had a very good turnout. About, I believe, 50 people showed up. We had a great time. I want to thank Joe Delacruz, our representative, as well as his father, for DJing the event. They did a great job, and the event is supposed to be annual, so there will be one next year, probably at the same time. So hope to see even more people out next year. Councilor Baumgartner.
Last week, I attended the Mystic Outdoor Arts Festival. Thank you. I attended the Mystic Outdoor Arts Festival. It was a wonderful event, probably the busiest arts festival Mystic has ever held. But just want to thank the organizers, Mystic Chamber of Commerce, and certainly the many volunteers and first responders that were manning an event that had thousands upon thousands of people. Also, Councilor Bordelon attended the Brantford Manor's Tenants Union. As Councilor Bordelon has stated, just completely inexcusable for many parents with 2 or 3 children continuing to live in hotels for now over 2 months as school is around the corner. It's unacceptable, and I hope we can get into those topics a little more tonight. And I believe that is all. Thank you.
Councilor Franco.
Thank you. I had attended the Athletic Fields Task Force meeting this past week. I volunteered with Groton Little League for the free family fun night, as discussed by Councilor Casari, where Community Speaks Out sponsored this event with Groton Little League, where there was free food and a movie and a plaque for Joey Gingerella, and thanking the family for raising the $40,000 to help put lights there at Calvin Burrows, which is just awesome, while they were dealing with such grief and tragedy in their own family. I had numerous conversations with residents in the community, as well as some correspondences, as was mentioned. I watched the RTM meeting, and I was very happy to hear that the opioid funds for Community Speaks Out passed unanimously, with absolutely everybody in favor from the RTM for that funding to go to Community Speaks Out. There's an upcoming blood drive here at Thrive 55 on September 3rd at 9 to 11. And I just have a question for the town manager when it's his time to make comments.
I don't have a time on
All
this
right.
one.
So was just questioning when the ARPA funding recommendations will be coming to the town council, and when do you foresee the funds being able to be distributed?
Hopefully soon, though it is a bit of a process. The Long-Term Recovery Committee, I anticipate, will be reviewing soon, making recommendations to the council. The council will have to do whatever they do, but then the RTM also has to approve accepting the funds. So, but hopefully very soon.
So that group will make a recommendation to the council.
Right.
The council will make their decision.
Make your decision, and then it goes.
And then it goes to RTM.
Yeah.
And do you foresee how long it might take the committee to make, to be able to get this wrapped up and over to us?
Hopefully not long, but it's hard to say until we get into it. But it's going to go to them very soon.
All right, thank you.
I just had a point of information. Do you have a date yet for the long-term committee to meet?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. I just wanted
We've
to-
got an internal meeting tomorrow with the ARPA coordinator to see where he's at on reviewing. He's going through all of it, making sure that all the information's there, et cetera. I believe he's just about done, so hopefully I'll know something tomorrow. As soon as I know anything, I'll let you know.
Council Parker?
I attended the Board of Ed meeting, negotiations meeting, continuing, and a TVCCA meeting / board retreat for all the TVCCA members and board members. Very nice meeting. As Councilor Kasseri mentioned, I went to the event at Calvin Burrows, and I want to congratulate Felicia Stevens for her new place called Green Ribbon Counseling on Pequannock Road. She's the one that did the murals within Fitch Middle, so congratulations on opening a new business in Groton. It's all about mental health and therapy, so reach out, check out her place. Very nice vibe and very welcoming. And that's all I have to report.
Thank you. Councilor Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I received the same emails and correspondence that the other councilors have received. Other than that, it's been very quiet. Thank you.
Thank you. On to the approval of minutes. On page 3, I make a motion to recommend a resolution approving the Committee of the Whole meeting minutes of August 8th, 2022. So moved.
Second, Bordelon?
Moved by Melendez, seconded by Bordelon. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Carries unanimously, 8 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstaining. Okay, on to new business. Electrolyte Health District update. And we've got representatives from Electrolyte to give a presentation.
Good evening, counselors. My name is Jen Muggio. I'm the Deputy Director with Electrolyte Health District, and I also have the honor of serving as Project Director for the New London County CARES project. And I'm here with my colleague, Tricia Rios, who's a CARES navigator, works directly for our partner Alliance for Living. And we just want to share with you about our work to address the overdose epidemic in our communities. So just as a way of background, we've been gathering as a cross-sector collaborative of the Overdose Action Team since 2017. We are committed as a team of multiple agencies and individuals from the community to following what science tells us about substance use and health, implementing evidence-based practices to prevent and reduce overdose in our community, and building a cadre of more informed community members who understand the evidence base and can help amplify those messages. We're going to talk a lot about our work, but I do want to set the stage with some data. And before we go through these next few slides, which will be quick, I do want to pause and recognize that we're looking at numbers on graphs. But these are people from our state, and later on another slide from our community. And we honor those lives, we honor the friends and families that are missing them, and we are committed to doing better because we recognize that every overdose is a policy failure because overdose is preventable. So as we hold space for those folks that we've lost and who have suffered overdose but thankfully recovered, we're just going to set the stage here with the data. So this is the trend of fatal overdoses in Connecticut over these years. You can see despite growing awareness and policy interventions at the state level to talk about reducing access to prescription pharmaceuticals and things like that, we continue to see overdoses climb. This is not in Connecticut alone. It's happening across the country. It's happening within Electrolyte Health District as a whole. And basically the same trend is happening within the town of Groton. The reason this is happening is because we have a significantly contaminated and adulterated drug supply. People are not able to make informed and safe decisions about their use because the supply is unstable and unpredictable. When we look at the tox screens from the deaths within Electrolyte Health District in 2015, these are the substances that were present in those tox screens. And I, of course, don't have my glasses on, but if you can look closely between the blocks on this screen in 2015 and on this screen from 2021, you'll see a significant increase in the number of deaths where fentanyl was present. We've seen this happen across the country, and it's happening locally. The drug supply is becoming more and more contaminated with fentanyl. And you can see another difference here, that we have a bigger increase, bigger block where cocaine was present. That's because fentanyl's contaminating, and I'm using the word contaminating, not laced, because most of the time it is accidental cross-contamination, all of the drugs. And so we are seeing people who are primarily stimulant users, which means they're opioid naive, they don't have a tolerance, they are unknowingly and accidentally ingesting fentanyl, and that is causing some of the deaths as well. I also just want to point out that on the screen, on this block in 2021, we see a new substance show up in a significant number. That's xylazine. It's an animal tranquilizer. I can do a whole hour-long presentation on xylazine, but it is increasing, impacting health outcomes and fatalities within our region. Connecticut as a whole was number 3, following Philadelphia and Maryland. In 2020, Connecticut had 10% of the fatalities. Xylazine was on board. In 2020, within Electrolyte Health District, it was within 13%. So in 2020, in our region, the supply had more xylazine than as the state, and the state as a whole was number 3 in the nation. There's lots of reasons this is happening. There's lots of things to talk about there, but it is causing, adding to the public health problem. So now that we are aware of what's happening, we want to talk about the things that can help keep people safe, and the strategies that we're implementing as a team. There are 3 primary domains that we want to talk about tonight, and our efforts to increase harm reduction efforts, our efforts to increase no barrier, timely, and on-demand access to effective evidence-based treatment, and our efforts to change the way that we as a community talk about substance use, and to change our policies and practices that create barriers for people's well-being. The first domain of harm reduction is a set of principles and practices that are designed to reduce the negative consequences of drug use. Harm reduction receives people without judgment, without preconceived goals for them, but with a set of strategies that are designed to help them be safer in their use, and to avoid negative outcomes associated with use. Harm reduction strategies include things like naloxone distribution. It includes syringe service programs. It includes fentanyl test strips. It includes encouraging people not to use alone, so that if they do ingest a higher than expected quantity of fentanyl, there's somebody there to call 911 and respond. The evidence base for harm reduction is strong, including that people are much more likely to eventually engage with treatment if they are engaged with and supported by harm reduction practices before they reach the point of looking for treatment. Our second strategy is our CARES community navigators, who work closely with our clinical partners from Yale University and Community Health Center, Inc. Our navigators work to engage with folks in the community through good old-fashioned community outreach. They connect folks with supports, whether that is helping them resolve an issue with their driver's license, connecting them with primary care, or if they're ready to talk about treatment, connecting them with one of the clinicians who can do field-based, literally field in the park, in Dunkin' Donuts, wherever they are, assessments, and start prescriptions for alcohol or opioid use disorder. I stopped clicking. There we go. And then our third domain is really, as I said, changing the way we talk about substance use, the way we talk about people who use drugs, and through those conversations, identifying the policies and practices that are creating additional barriers to people's health and well-being. I'd love to pass it to my colleague Trish now, just to share a little bit more detail of what that looks like day to day, the community outreach, and particularly some of the things that she and her colleagues have been doing within Groton.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to let me come here and talk about what we do in Groton. Prior to coming here, I just was dealing with a situation at Roadway Inn, trying to help a family. Sorry. We've been doing this for about 5 years. I started in the beginning, and Groton has always been included. I'm a New Londoner. I started in Groton, living in Groton in '99, and I'm also a person with lived experience. I've been in remission for 13 years, and that has been my gift to be able to do the work that I do in our community. When we come to Groton, Groton is obviously different than New London. We work with people that are aging from 20 to 72 years old. Some of them are in Tent City, some of them are in Groton Long Point, some of them have a career, families. I wish all of them were like that, but we have a big community also that is homeless in Tent City. We work with people that have substance use, right, or mental health, or both. And to be able to take my experience and engage with them and start a conversation, which may be something like, I need food, I don't have any food, here, let me get you some food. We have a really good pantry at Alliance for Living, so that also encourages people to keep a conversation going with me. But that one conversation has turned into food, to primary care, to finding somebody who stopped using at 52 years old for the first time in maybe 25 years, getting them into primary care and catching them with breast cancer very early on. And this person has been able to battle the breast cancer, addiction, mental health, and is still in what we consider now long-term recovery. Every day is different when we come here. We go to social services, we park there, we go to some stores, we've done Narcan training. A lot of the stores in Groton have been very receptive to doing Narcan trainings, which is great because I believe everybody should carry Narcan. But I think that the idea that Groton is different than New London is we're different by the name. That's about it, because we're just as busy here as we are in New London. And I think that's pretty much, I could go on for a long time about what I do, but every day is different, and our goal is to help people and to help them stay alive and to realize that we're here to help them.
Okay, well, my last slide was just our contact information. So we do have a phone number people can call or text. It's not an emergency line, but anyone is welcome to call or text if they want more information, if they want to connect with a navigator. There we go. If they're interested in getting an naloxone kit, fentanyl test strips, linkages to support, 860-333-3494. I'd also like to invite everybody at the table and in the room and out there in TV land to join us at the parking lot right next door here at 1:30 next Wednesday, which is August 31st, International Overdose Awareness Day, for a short gathering to both honor International Overdose Awareness Day, learn more about overdose, get trained on naloxone. We will have free naloxone kits for everybody in attendance. And finally, I just would like to ask you to ask me any questions and learn more about the work we're doing, which is funded through Piece Together grant streams, and although important and meaningful and what gets us all up in the morning, not big enough, not funded enough not robust enough to address the challenges that our community members face.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation, and also the work you do in our community. Councilor Parker?
Quick question. You have information from 2015 on. Do you have anything before that? Because cocaine was in use, and would it be possible to get those numbers too?
We can go back further, for sure. When we go back that further, that's an important point, right? Because we haven't really seen significant changes in rates of use or patterns of use, but we are now seeing growing numbers of deaths among people who use cocaine, and that is a reflection of how much more adulterated and contaminated and unsafe the drug supply has become. And there's lots of discussion to be had behind that about, market responses to policies that restricted access to pharmaceuticals and created kind of vacuums that unfortunately the drug cartels found a way to step into in a way that benefited them and really hurt our communities.
That was yes? You can get us that report?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Councilor Bordelon?
Thank you. I just appreciate everything that you guys do in this form of outreach. I know I had volunteered and was with, you guys for some other outreach programs that you guys did highlighting, lots of things that kind of dove in and around this. So I constantly appreciate what you guys bring forward. One of the things that I've been doing a lot of reading on and what I'm seeing a lot of education on too is with marijuana and vape pens, the cross-contamination that's happening with heroin. As the legalization of marijuana comes into play, it's, youth are getting their hands on contaminated, and adults, contaminated marijuana, and they're smoking, I guess, the marijuana at the same rate and not realizing, and there's youth that are just dropping dead that have never been exposed to opioids before and didn't have the tolerance. And so I didn't know if you had any information on that, because right now what I'm seeing is a huge trend of youth vaping everywhere, vaping in school, vaping in the bathroom. You can walk into the school any given day and the front bathroom is filled with vape, sweet smell. And I think parents need to be aware that vape pens doesn't mean that it's just nicotine in there. And they are putting fentanyl in the oils. Some folks aren't smoking marijuana and then actually taking the nicotine and putting a little bit of fentanyl in there with that. All ways to get high. So I just didn't know if you had any thoughts or education on that part at all that could be shared.
Sure, thanks for that. Thank you. I want to pause for a minute and lift up the work of my colleague at the Health Department, Carolyn Wilson, and the ongoing efforts of the GASP Coalition, more than 20 years in existence, to help our youth understand what health looks like and help them achieve health. There are lots of stories out there about the impact on marijuana of this cross-contamination issue. The good news is that all of the stories end up being unsubstantiated when we dig into the lab reports. There have not been documented cases of marijuana that have been contaminated with fentanyl, even if initial reports indicated that it was contaminated. If we look at this from an economic standpoint, it's not profitable for the drug manufacturers to take fentanyl, which carries a high profit margin for them, and put it in marijuana, which doesn't carry as much. So it doesn't make sense from that economic standpoint that they do that. And even if the accidental cross-contamination were to happen, the way that people ingest marijuana is not conducive actually to the fentanyl carrying the strong enough effects to result in overdose if we were to ingest it. So when you apply fentanyl has a much lower burn rate. If you apply open flame to it, if you were smoking marijuana, if you were baking marijuana, it would kind of decontaminate it, for lack of a better term. It's also true that we see cross-contamination with pressed pills. It's a big concern for our youth especially. And the pressed pill market is strong, and the pressed pill market is carrying very high risk that those pressed pills would be contaminated accidentally or purposely with fentanyl. the good news, I don't know if there's any good news here, but the silver lining there is, again, if we're ingest a pressed pill, even if it has fentanyl, if we swallow the pill and take it in its whole, the way that our body processes the pill and processes the fentanyl, it would not suffer an overdose. The risk is if people are crushing the pill to snort it or ingest it some other way. And so that's where our work to distribute the fentanyl test strips comes into play, because it allows people an opportunity to test that product and see whether there's fentanyl on board, and then make a decision about their consumption, whether they're going to make sure that somebody's with them when they use more slowly, make sure that they're not using 2 substances at once, or not use that particular product.
Thank you so much for all that you guys do, and definitely highlighting, the fact versus what's being said about, in the vape pens and things. And I look forward to seeing more information coming out, and just appreciate everything that you guys do to help our community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Franco?
Would it be possible to get a Narcan training event here, maybe during one of our town council meetings for all of us, and maybe to have it televised so that people at home may understand?
We'd be
How it
honored and
works.
thrilled. Let us know when. We could do it now in 3 minutes if you want.
Because I would be very interested in that. And can you once again state when you're having that event and where you're having it? But I would still like to have one here and have it, on camera for all to see.
We'd love to. And if you're able to join us in person on International Overdose Awareness Day, Wednesday, August 31st, we'll be in the parking lot here. Fingers crossed there's no rain, at 1:30.
Thank you very much. I appreciate
Thank you.
that.
Thank you. Councilor Kassiri?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to piggyback off of what Councilor Franco was just asking you, I actually have made a referral to do a educational campaign in the town about recovery and addiction. Is that something that you think would be a good idea? Because in my opinion, education is power. And if so, would that be something that you would be willing to come in and speak when we can take up my referral item and teach us about the educational components about that?
Again, we'd be honored and thrilled. Thank you. Yeah, we consider that education, whether it's to the community at large, whether it's to business owners or individuals and family members, a key part of our work, because we can't be everywhere. We can't be engaging with everybody who's actively using or who's managing their recovery. So the more that people that we can reach with this factual information, the better chance we have of protecting our community members.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for all the work you're doing, and I look forward to seeing you when we take up that item. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Baumgartner?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Jen, for your great presentation. Just a question regarding the slide that states drug types involved for the data for 2015 and 2021. What's the data supposed to signify?
So when somebody dies of a drug overdose, there is an autopsy performed by the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, and those are the data that come from the tox screens. So what we don't know from those data is how people ingested the substances. I'll start this conversation by saying it's rare. Maybe one person out of all of the deaths in 2021. It's rare that anybody ever has only one substance on board. Most of the use in our communities, most of the time we see polysubstance use. What we don't know from those data is how people ingested the multiple substances, whether they did it knowingly or unknowingly, whether they ingested them at the same time. I mean, the OCME professionals can learn a little bit about that from the percentages that still are on board, but we still don't have the insight into what exactly happened. But when we put those data together with what we know from testing drugs and drug trash using mass spectrometers at different sites around the country, soon to be happening in Connecticut, when we put it together with what's happening in other fatalities around the nation, we know that we can tell the story a little bit better of what's happening with the contamination. And that, again, there are people who knowingly and seek out a combination of a stimulant and an opioid. But most of the time, that's part of their pattern of use. It's something that they've developed a tolerance to the opioid. And while they don't know, because it's an unregulated product and it's unpredictable, they don't always know how much fentanyl they're consuming. Those folks may know they're consuming fentanyl. The risk is for people who are primarily only stimulant users and don't have that any level of tolerance built up. And again, the contamination is accidental cross-contamination somewhere along the line in the chain. Probably the person who sold it to them isn't even aware that that happened. And unfortunately, they are at high risk because they don't have any tolerance. But everybody who uses drugs faces that risk because there's no way to know, even if they use a fentanyl test strip and they know there's fentanyl in the product, there's no way to tell how much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Could you go back to your first slide? I think it's what's happening with the deaths by the year.
Sean will have to-
Okay. While they're working on that, I'll take advantage just to continue that thought about people not knowing, if there's anybody out there listening who is using drugs, we just encourage everybody to use safer use practices. Again, that includes not using alone. If there isn't anybody that you can trust to share your use with, there are hotlines you can call so that somebody knows you're actively consuming. And if you don't respond to a text message or a phone call in a certain amount of time, they'll call 911. Having somebody nearby that has naloxone on hand, using smaller amounts, not using multiple substances at once, and doing all the other things that we say keep us healthy, like staying hydrated and getting good sleep.
Yeah.
The one with
Yeah.
what's happening?
That one. There you go. Thank you.
All of Connecticut.
Yeah. There you go. Yes. I just wanted to point out, because I spend a lot of time looking at these numbers, it would seem that if we were able to get back down to that 728 from 2015, that would be a great victory, which at this point it would be. But I think it's important to point out that 728 at that time was a very high and elevated number, where this actually became on people's radars to actually track this. If you go back to like 2012, I think all over the state of Connecticut would have been more closer to like 300, 350. So actually that 1,500 is about 4 times what would be considered normal from about 2 decades ago. So I just think that's very important to point out. So thank you.
Thank you.
That's fine. Any other questions from the council? Council Bordelon?
So some of the data too that I was reading is that we're seeing the numbers increase post, we're still in COVID, but from the start of COVID to even now, the fallout where people are coming out and trying to seek help, but the increase in depression and usage is up. Is that fair to say that COVID had an impact on the amount of numbers, and did you notice a significant increase in usage?
I think that what we'll learn is that it is absolutely fair to say COVID has had an impact, and that when we see growing numbers in the years that include us responding and dealing with the pandemic, that was impacted by COVID. It's really, if I step back from the fact that, these are our community members that we're talking about and kind of think objectively, it's a little interesting to think about the nuance here, right? Because I think there's multiple ways COVID is impacting these outcomes. And I think it's important for us to recognize there are multiple ways, because that's how we identify the policy solutions. So certainly we had an increased sense of isolation. Will we learn from surveys and other data that there was increased use associated with that? I'll be interested to see, but we certainly know there was increased use of instances of people using alone, which is an unsafe situation, right, because of the isolation. We've certainly seen a growing mental health crisis, which began pre-COVID for our community members, right? And so the conversation about the intersection of mental health and substance use and how people do end up self-medicating because of the lack of access to care for their mental well-being, and substances supplying them with a relief they've never felt before, is an important threat for us to follow. It's also important for us to follow the conversation about the contaminated supply. If our community members were isolated and stopped travel and changed their plans, you know, those things occurred for all of the people involved in the supply chain of drugs too, right? And so how did that open opportunities for additional contamination to occur? And for people who might have had one supply source that they kind of went to and knew what they were getting, and then had to seek out another supply source. So I think that when we follow this conversation about the impact of COVID on the overdose epidemic, it's really important that we look at all of the multiple impacts and layers, because we've got to change our policies if we want to save our lives and of our community members, and step back from our tendency to kind of apply prohibitionist policies, because we're still losing too many neighbors.
Thank you for that, and I appreciate your wording on when you discuss this. It's, you know, ideally in a perfect world, we hope that no one uses. But this is, you know, like when they did all the stuff about birth control and all that, people are going to do that. So like give them the tools they need and teach them how to do it in a way that may be more responsible. Ideally, you're not advocating, yeah, go do it, but you're not naive in the sense that you're presenting a package where you're saying, we know what's happening and people are gonna do it. So here are ways that you can, you know, and I just think that's awesome. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I don't see any more questions from the council. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you so much for your time.
And I'd just like to note that Councilor McBride joined us at 6:48. Welcome. And we are now on to Brantford Manor update, page 8. And we have members from both Electrolyte Health District and the city here to give us some information. I would just like to explain sort of the point of this agenda item. We're going to be having regularly scheduled Brantford Manor updates every month. This month, we are basically here to get an update of what the situation is like currently. That's why we've invited the city and as well as Electrolyte Health District. Our plan for next month currently is to have the tenants come speak to us about their situation and their experience, and the month following that right now, we hope to have Related here. So with that, I will welcome Electrolyte Health District as well as the city. And John, you can start us off.
Sure. As the mayor said, the focus tonight is doing an update on where we're at with Brantford Manor. Now, this is from the town perspective, of course, in terms of meetings I've been in, as well as documents, emails I've received. There could certainly be many other perspectives. And to learn more about the roles and responsibilities of each of the agencies present here. Just to start off, I do want to say that the priority of myself and I believe the council is the health of Brantford's tenants. as well as seeking a swift, safe resolution to the issues. That's utmost. Just a quick background on from our perspective, from the town perspective, our role is more involved with the tax incentive agreement. That was passed in April of 17 and goes through June 30th of 2037. The purpose of the agreement was for Brantford to provide 100% Section 8 housing and 100% income limited rental housing, along with investing $18.5 million to construct a new 3,000 square foot residential services building, maintain exterior and interior repairs, upgrades, renovations, that sort of thing. And there were some additional requirements like spending a minimum of $15,000 annually to provide social services to residents. Concerns from residents or tenants of Brantford Manor were first received by the city and then the town. Council members had an agenda item here on June 14th at the Committee of the Whole to discuss. The two largest initial concerns were the loss of basements for storage. And just for note, out of 442 units, there's 144 with basements, the rest have crawl spaces. And then, of course, the mold issues. And there's a variety of other building-related issues that were brought forward, but those were the two first big ones. And Related has readily admitted in the past that they had not been doing appropriate maintenance there for a number of years. Following the June 14th Committee of the Whole meeting, the city mayor, Mayor Hedrick, and I did a joint letter to Related saying what we expected from them in addressing this. And then Housing and Urban Development right around the same time, let me back up one. Related retained Atlas technical consultants to do visual inspection assessments of the 144 units with basements. The work was completed and the results were provided to Related on 6/24/22, showing, I believe it was either 94 or 95 instances of mold out of the 144 units. HUD came in and did a REAC, or a Real Estate Assessment Center inspection in late June. They inspected 25 units and found mold in 10 of those, so about 40% of those inspected. The grade given by REAC was 70 out of 100. Just for note, 60 is passing. But it has been decreasing since the last couple of reports, even though the remodeling work had been completed. They had a score of 80, so 70 this time, 81 in 2016, and 83 in 2014. It was a little lower back in 2011, it was at 76. They undertook some mold remediation with a licensed remediation company. They had, of those units originally found a mold, 16 units were, and this is as of July 28th, with the last update I'd been given. They remediated 16 units, 4 units were in progress, and they had some more scheduled. However, they subsequently brought in HEDI, the Hydro Environmental Technologies, Inc., as a third-party advisor to assist in assessment and remediation. So basically, they went back and they're looking over all the old work and looking at all 442 units. Let's see, they're using a visual and instrument-based inspection for all those units, including those remediated prior. Process additionally includes temperature and relative humidity measurements and limited tape life surface samples. Based on those results, HEDI develops a remediation action plan for each unit. So as they get each unit done, they put something together saying how that should be addressed, as each one's different. They've completed 70 inspections of 77 units. Brantford Manor is awaiting reports on findings and recommendation protocols. They said the assessments are expected to take about 6 to 7 weeks after the inspections for each unit. Remediation to occur immediately thereafter once they have a protocol in place. Preliminary findings indicate there were some consistencies in the sources of moisture, how it was getting there, but they still have to individualize each plan. And then Brantford Manor and HEDI brought in specialists to develop a solution for the basements and crawl spaces as they go, another expert. They're waiting for recommendations. They did install leak detectors in the basements. They know there's some faulty PEX pipes because of the exposure, I believe they thought, to sunlight. Their intent is to replace all of those. That's going to be a monumental task, though, throughout all the facilities. That's going to take likely a couple of years at least. And one of our, obviously, as you mentioned, one of our big concerns is the long-term housing of tenants in hotels. As of August 15th, there were tenants from 7 units in those hotels. let's see, Brantford indicated yesterday that they're freeing up 12 units furnished in their facilities to use as people have work done on their rooms. As of yesterday, they had 3 clearance reports for units that have been provided to the tenants' legal counsel, and they're working on, they have 3 more coming. So they're trying to provide space for living during work being done. And another note is the tenants union or association is currently being formed. I think that's great, help assert their rights and improve communications with related. Electrolyte will touch on this, but I believe they have inspections of units scheduled for August 30th and 31st. Been coordinating with tenant legal counsel. One item of other note is the tenant's legal counsel previously had mold air testing done in units and found samples with elevated and slightly elevated mold. There's a difference of opinion between related and the tenants council on how best to remediate. And I don't pretend to be a mold expert, but that is a bit of a holdup on things. Let's see, and I do encourage Brantford and related to be as accommodating as possible and to go above and beyond to alleviate tenant concerns, do everything they can for what they've been through. And then in terms of the basement issue, Mayor Hedrick and I attended a meeting with tenant association or union leadership and related just a couple weeks ago. They're throwing out or discussing ideas about the basement, so we're gonna have another meeting, I think, in a couple weeks. So from my perspective, that's where we're at from the information I have, and I don't know if, do you want to take over, Steve?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Good evening, everyone. Steve Mansfield, Director of Health for Electrolyte Health District. If I may, can I just walk around and pass these out? So I just put together a few packets. It really set the framework for what Electrolyte Health District is responsible for when it comes to environmental health concerns. I can just walk.
They're not going to hear you on the microphone.
Microphone, they're not gonna hear you on the microphone.
I'm sorry. I'll wait till I get back. The end of the packet is, but there are a few attachments that are new. So I'd like to walk everyone through what Electrolyte Health District's responsibilities are in terms of environmental complaints. It really all starts with 198206 of the Connecticut General Statutes, which essentially says, it's highlighted in red on the first page. Whenever we become aware of an environmental health nuisance in our jurisdiction, it's our job to examine it, go out and do an investigation. It's not optional. It says we shall, within our respective jurisdictions, go out and do that. And that's what we always do. On page 2, you'll see a general complaint form. This is what we use for the intake for all complaints that we receive at Electrolyte Health District. We can receive them via telephone, in person, on our website, via email, fax. So we solicit those from people. We encourage people to submit any kind of environmental health complaints to us. It gets assigned to one of our environmental health sanitarians, and we go out and do an investigation. As 198206 says, we're required to do that. The only times we won't go out and do an investigation if it becomes evident during our discussion with the tenant that it doesn't fall under our jurisdiction. So if somebody calls and says, my smoke detectors aren't working, we'll inform them that falls under the fire marshal's office and make a referral to that office. That happens pretty frequently, but environmental health complaints, we go out and do an investigation. I know one of the things we talked about was getting a current status of what we are doing at Electrolyte Health District and what we know. So if you go to the next page, you'll see a spreadsheet that says Brantford Manor complaint status as of today. So it's 2 pages long. There are currently 39 complaints. Some of them, if you look at the status about halfway across the sheet, some are open, some are closed. And then in the comment section on the far right, there are notes. And I will mention this is an internal document that our environmental health investigators use to track the complaints we get and how we move forward with addressing those. If you could note, if you go down to line number 19, you'll see that on 818, everything from 818 right through, which is complaint number 19, through 39. We just received this past Friday from the representative who is representing a number of tenants at that complex. So as Town Manager Burton mentioned, we're currently working with counsel for those individuals to set up comprehensive inspections for each of those particular units. I'll say that, one of the things we at Ledgelight have struggled with is getting the information about who is actually having issues or problems within Brantford Manor. And we've struggled with this. One of the things we've done relatively recently is put together a flyer that we've distributed through the mayor's office. I believe the mayor brought it to the picnic last week. It's on the Brantford Manor website, City of Groton website. But it basically will encourage people, as I said before, it's in Spanish and English. If you have housing concerns that are environmental and they're related to what you think is a health concern, reach out to us. We will respond. We will get into your unit and make an assessment of whether or not an environmental health nuisance exists. And then based on the severity of that, we may have to order correction of that environmental health nuisance, or more often than not, we work with the property owner. This is in every case to tell them what they need to do, either from a legal perspective or a recommendation. And generally, when we make recommendations, the folks listen to us. So we're happy that these individuals now have someone advocating on their behalf to get the information to us so we can utilize our resources to help address these issues in these communities. The last thing I've attached is a Dph Fact Sheet. This is basically addresses mold in general, focuses on what types of testing may or may not be useful in the beginning of an investigation, toward the middle of an investigation, or later on. As I mentioned, we've only been into about half of the units that the legal counsel have brought to our attention. So we haven't even identified in a lot of cases whether or not there is an environmental health concern. That's not to say there isn't. There very well may be, and we find those in some of these units and in a lot of the communities that we go out in. We just don't know about them yet. So when we can get into those units, make a determination of what needs to be done, then we relay that information to the people who are responsible for fixing that problem. So we're confident that working with that representative, that we'll be able to identify those units that have yet to be identified and make the necessary either recommendations or, in some cases, public health orders to remediate those issues. So that's a lot of information, a very short period of time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Mayor Hedrick, would you like to go first?
Yeah, just a couple of things to add to John. I've been working with Groton Public School System, Susan Austin, and with Brantford Manor to reach out to the moms that have kids that are going to be in school so that we can get them transportation to and from school. That was an issue. So the first thing was try to get people back in. So we're working with Related to get them in. And then the second thing is for those that are still at the hotels to get them transportation so that they can go to schools. So like John said, we're still meeting and talking to Related, getting them to move forward. One of the things that I'd asked for was a remediation plan, and I guess there was some wording challenges there. What I'm looking for, because he was like, well, are you looking for this wall, then that wall? And I said, no, when are we gonna do what unit when, or what L when? And so that's a schedule. So I asked if I could get a copy of the schedule. He's working with his attorney to determine what they can provide, and as soon as I get a schedule of the testing remediation, then I'll get that to John, and then it'll get to everybody here.
Thank you. Councilor Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To the director of Ledgelight, I noticed just reading through all of our packet of material that there's a lot of different standards and ideas on that the people use for measuring all of these different things. Do you have a sense of what set of standards you are using and are you using the same standards that the remediation people are using, so we're all on the same page?
That's a really good question. So the Department of Public Health makes it very clear in all of their literature, and I have spoken to the epidemiologist just yesterday morning to confirm that their data was up to date and accurate. One of the most difficult things about mold is it's very subjective. So there may be mold present in one person's house that causes absolutely no health effects. The same kind of mold, or a new person moves into that house, say, a new family member moves in, they may have detrimental effects associated with the mold. So that's why it's such, as the flyer says, it's tricky business to make a determination as to what level of mold, when you're measuring, raises to the level of a public health concern. There are not enforceable standards in the state of Connecticut when it comes to looking at the results from, say, an air test. It may say, and I'm just making these numbers up, but if it says 100 parts per million indoors and only 10 outdoors, that very well may be true, and it may be causing symptoms or illness inside, but there isn't a standard to reference. So from a public health standpoint, I couldn't issue a public health order based on those numbers or that comparison, because there isn't a law to back me up. And whenever we write a public health order, we have to make sure that we have either a statute or an ordinance or a regulation that we can rely on, so we're not being arbitrary in our decisions. That being said, we will look at all of the evidence that comes to us, whether it's testing that a company has provided, our visual assessments when we go into the unit, what we experience when we're in the unit. We've been in units where our throats burn, our lungs burn, our eyes burn, generally, I'm talking historically. So we take all those things into consideration, and we have issued public health orders based on indoor air quality when there's a preponderance of evidence, when it is clear, and I'm comfortable enough to stand before a judge and say, yes, what we observed here today rises to the level of a public health nuisance, and we're comfortable issuing an order to the property owner for remediation. So to answer your question, I don't know, because I haven't reviewed all of the standards that the company is using to make their recommendations, and I haven't seen all of the final recommendations, but we will make our recommendations based on the Connecticut General Statutes and the Public Health Code. If we have to pull in DPH toxicology and epidemiologists, we'll do that as well. And that's what we do as a matter of routine.
So at the current moment, you don't have any real sense that related remediation teams are using the same standards that you're looking at, or do you know if they are?
I don't know if they are.
Is that something we should probably check on, just so that we kind of know we're on the same page?
Well, just to be clear, we at Electrolyte Health District, we are not indoor air quality experts. We don't have the ability to test. We just don't have that expertise, or we're not educated in those standards. So we'll rely on the experts, the toxicologists and the folks at DPH, to help us interpret the data if the data needs interpreting, but we don't have that expertise to interpret the data. So if there are two companies that are working in Brantford Manor and they submit their indoor air quality reports and they make a recommendation, we don't have the expertise to evaluate their recommendations and say, yeah, this sounds like a good plan. We can look at the Connecticut Public Health Code and general statutes and apply those standards and make our recommendations. So yeah, that's I think the short answer.
10 minutes break, does that sound like a problem? That you don't know what anybody's working to? We're all working at different standards?
Well, I think it's just a challenge that there aren't any standards, so, you can't really say no one's, not working to a certain standard. You saw in the packet, I reached out to Mystic Air Quality, hoping they could kind of serve as our expert, but they declined. And even, as you saw in the email, it's very subjective, so it's really difficult. But there's not much, I think the final line of his emails, so there's not much the town can do on that, so.
Yeah, and I think it's a very good point that you made. There aren't any standards in the state of Connecticut to look at and say, this level of mold constitutes a public health concern or justifies the issuance of a public health order. They're simply not there. So I would be remiss in my duties to issue a public health order that was based on a feeling or subjective. And I'm perfectly happy to make recommendations and work with these companies to address the needs of these residents. That's absolutely something we can do. When I'm talking about the lack of appropriate standards, it just prohibits us from taking legal action, which in my field is the issuance of a public health order.
Am I also correct that there are no federal standards either?
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Hedrick?
If I may, real quick. So to address this, one of the challenges you run into is that the related companies and the contractors they're hiring, they're doing swipes or swaps. So they're looking at mold spores per area as opposed to a volumetric rate, which is spores per cubic meter or per milliliter. And you can't compare a volumetric sample to an area sample because they're not the same. And that's one of the challenges you run into there because you basically got apples and oranges. And I know Related and the Residents Council are talking and communicating, trying to reach some sort of resolution. And it's a challenge. And HUD was reached out to, the EPA was reached out to try to come up with a finding or a standard to use. And that standard has not been, EPA and the HUD have not come up with that yet.
Okay. Council Bordelon?
Thank you. So, as a person who's been involved with this from the beginning and has known for over 20 years that water's been leaking in, and it's not rocket science, it's not just the piping, it's everything. My first question is to the city mayor. You stated that the documents for completion, those quarterly documents that the city didn't have, but possibly the town has. John, do we have those completion documents?
The quarterly updates?
Yeah, he said that maybe the town has them.
We have the completion documents, we don't have the quarterly updates.
So no one knows where the quarterly documents are. Okay. So besides the mold, it doesn't take an epidemiologist or a psychologist or a therapist or anybody to look inside those houses and walk in, even from the outside, and smell the mold. Let's take the mold out. In fact, this fact sheet states there's no standard. And that's one thing that I will be committed to for Brantford, that I will be fighting up in Hartford to make sure there is a standard for quality of living. Just because there's not a standard doesn't mean that we have not learned from the past, like lead in our water, acceptable levels. We need to know, we know, and it doesn't take anyone with the credentials or degrees to say, as it was stated, that some people are reactive. So some people are reactive to small levels of lead in our water. That's acceptable. There's acceptable levels of lead in our public water as we drink it. My level of lead in the water should be 0. The level of mold should be managed and controlled, and if there's reactions and it's visible, then it's a concern. If it's in the air, it's a concern. But let's take the mold out of this. Let's look at the contract. $18.5 million was invested, and when you look at the scores, they've plummeted. The lower one was 76. Now we're at 70. At one point, they were at 80. How do you invest $18.5 million and then your numbers go down? Take the mold out of it. Look at the repairs. Brantford Manor and its company are in default by timely and accurately and effectively and safely repairing the houses and the units despite the mold. Take the piping problem. People have complained that their tubs are dripping onto their dining room tables. That has nothing to do with the piping. It has to do with the maintenance and the poor quality of maintenance that's coming in there. What also is happening, if something was to leak in my house, I have someone come out, cut it open, aerate it, right? Before mold gets there. Make sure before it's sealed, it's treated and closed, and it's properly handled. This is what's not happening at Brantford. So we can put all these little things and say the fact sheet and the mold thing and this, but what we can say is that the company has an obligation to provide healthy, safe nurturing environment for people to be able to live and grow in safely and comfortably. That we can say, and we don't need any specialists to do that. That is not happening. So I have concerns. Documents are not around. You know, we have an obligation as a town. We're abating almost $500-something thousand. I understand a default doesn't mean we're gonna take it all away, but what we can do as a council is and say, yes, you're in default. You're not following this. You're not providing the social services. The playgrounds are a wreck. You're not doing this. And as a town and a city, we can come together. This was the referral that I had sent forward.
Councilor Bordelon, your time has expired.
I'll just close my sentence. And I sent forward, and I asked for other people to be around the table, and my referral only gave me half the people. We have an obligation here to do what's right, and I encourage this council to send forth a letter saying that they're acting in a way that, yes, if they
Mr. Mayor?
approach it, they can
Time
fix
is
it,
up.
but we need to
Councilor
make
Bordelon, your
sure.
time has expired.
Thank you. We need to make sure that we're putting something in writing that's a little bit more powerful than
Point of
a
order?
conversation. Thank you.
Councilor Bordelon, your time has expired.
I'm aware of that. I'm very passionate about this. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
you didn't give me a chance to speak to my referral either. Every other counselor has had a chance to speak, and I would like my chance to open up with my option for my referral. We haven't done that in the past?
I don't know what you're referring to.
Usually when a counselor puts a referral
Councilor
on,
Franco, you have the floor.
you allow them to
Yeah.
speak to it first.
Appreciate it. So, I'm hearing that basically there's no plan that's come forward. There's no standard for the mold, and we're trying to sort out how to go forward dealing with this community. Are you feeling like Related is trying to fix the issues? Do you feel like they are working in a direction of trying to do right by the residents of that community? Because I'm hearing that they've hired, you know, like some mold remediation people. They're putting people in hotels, which honestly, and I know there's a short-term rental issue in our community right now, but it would be much better to put them in short-term rentals. So at least they're in a home environment where they're not just in a room with a bed. I mean, they really should be in like short-term rentals right now. Maybe that could be brought to them at some point to request that that happens instead of hotel rooms.
Can I add something? Maybe I didn't make it clear, those 12 rooms they're working on will first be offered to the ones that are newly furnished and clean, they'll be offered to the people in the hotels if they haven't been already.
Right, but if they're putting people in housing of some sort to get them out of that environment while they're fixing it, they probably should be in like short-term rentals where it's more of a home environment for their family. And where they could, as it has been mentioned, where they can cook and they can sit maybe at a table and do homework with children and such. Just a piece of advice. So I need to sort of figure out, do we feel as though Related is doing the initial setup to try and get the remediation really taken care of? Because I'm hearing from another counselor about this contract, and and I've heard from other counselors that we should get rid of our tax abatement. And our town attorney is here, and my thought is, if we get rid of the contract, the tax abatement, there will be the communication with Related in the town will cease. That will be it. It will end. We will go to litigation, and there will be absolutely no communication. It'll probably just stop. If we remain in the contract, my goal, I thought, us as a council, is to fix this for these people that are going through this situation. So are they working towards fixing anything? Are they maybe getting a plan together and they're not sharing it with us? I mean, like, what is happening other than I'm reading like the mold, there's no standards. We can't change that right this minute. So what's going on here?
I'll speak first, and then the mayor. The mayor's much closer to it than I am. I would just say from my perspective, they were slow to get things going, and their communication skills are still not perfect. They've been improving. We're always on them about it, But I do think they're intent on fixing it, but I'm not privy to, to all the dialogue between Related and tenants and their council. But from my perspective, it appears it's now starting to progress, but.
So from the beginning, I started working with Related to get this moving forward. They started moving forward. I think they are moving forward. At the last meeting that John and I attended, I expressed my concern about the pace. Not happy with the pace. I'd like the pace to pick up. But they do have Hetty that is there. They have testing that's being done. They have remediation. They have tested some apartments. They have remediated some apartments. So they are moving forward with that. When we got complaints, we have complaints that were issued. You can see the complaints here. The Electrolyte will be going out, and my building inspector will be going out as well, because some of the complaints are mold related, some of the complaints are mold and then maintenance issues. And then we will file reports and track the progress of fixing the repairs and those kind of things. From the beginning, when Deputy Mayor and I were talking to them, we said you need to put people in apartments, or if you had make space, shift space, so that you put them over here instead of getting them in the apartments. And then we reached out, we talked to HUD, other people were talking to HUD. HUD finally came to them and said, you need to make some apartments available. Now the apartments are being made available. So they are going in a direction. Sometimes they're getting there on their own. Sometimes they are getting assistance from outside agencies, meaning HUD, us, to try to move them in the right direction. This is a large problem. You got 442 units. When you look at the 96 out of 144, that's about 64% of mold. We talk about 10 out of 25, that's 40%. I reached out to HUD and I said, my concern is we have a mold problem. I need your help with the expansion of inspection for mold. I wanted HUD to come back and do some additional inspections. They have not responded in the affirmative that they're going to do that. I'm trying to set up an appointment with them so that John and I can speak with them. I've been communicating with them via email, and we're trying to set up an appointment so we can talk about the issues that are there, the basements, the mold, and this whole remediation plan. What's it going to look like, right? When do you sample? How do you sample? How do you get people in? How do you get them out? How do you control all that? And what does that look like, right? Because and one of the challenges that Zach had, he says, well, what do you call completion? Do you call completion when we think the mold has been remediated? Do you call it completion when we're ready to turn it over? Do you call it completion when Representatives Council accepts it? Do you call it completion when somebody gets back in? So it gets complicated with some of the words that we use. The concern that I have is right now they're moving forward. If the council takes drastic action, and you guys can certainly do that because there's $450,000 at stake for you guys. For the city, it's only about $60,000. And if you do the math for me, $60,000, $200 an hour, that's for an attorney, that's 300 hours, right? So that's something that I'm looking at as well. You guys, it's more, but here's the deal. If you take drastic action, they will shut down. It'll go attorney. Nobody's gonna be able to talk about it. Nobody's gonna be able to do anything. And everything will slow down. And the people that get hurt are these guys back here. And my commitment is to the moms and the kiddos to get them back in those places, get them safe. When I met at the Rock on May 6th, I was there first. I've been dealing with this, working with this to move this forward. And so I think they are moving it forward. I am in no way, shape, or form defending Related or what they've done, but that's a separate issue. And if you want to address that at another meeting or later on, that's okay. What we need to do now is focus on getting it identified, getting it fixed, and getting these guys back, getting the moms and their kids back in their house. Did that answer your?
I think so, yes,
Question?
thank you. And Attorney Duggan, if there were drastic measures and the contract, do you, first of all, would you find them right now currently legally in default?
I'm not going to answer that, directly one way or the other. What I can say is that if the actions that have been taken to date or in the past, supported a default, I think you wind up with the same sorts of issues, that were being discussed earlier, where right now, are you getting more in terms of trying to get the places cleaned up, folks back in their homes, et cetera, by working with them versus taking a more antagonistic approach. It's not to say, again, that there haven't been things that have been done wrong. I think the question is, where do you go from here? And the contract, even if there was a default, the contract provides for a notice period. The contract further states that if they're moving basically in the right direction towards getting something done, then they're going to get a delay, on the ability to actually call in that default. So whether or not it exists or doesn't exist, my suggestion is that you're still looking towards the bigger picture, which is how do you get the places clean and how do you get folks back in there and living in a healthy environment?
Right, and that's what my goal is, to get it clean and get people back living in their homes. And if there's a potential for the council to go into default on the contract, would you, in your experiences, would you think that that's where communication would cease?
Councilor's
And that
time has expired.
any communication would be done in executive session going forward, if that was the case?
Sure, I think there'd be a much less open flow of communication. Right now, you have your town and city leaders able to obtain certain information directly from Brantford Manor and potentially from other, federal agencies and potentially from Ledgelight, where that might, that type of interaction probably would cease or slow down significantly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question for Mayor Hendrick. You had mentioned several ideas about completion. In your mind, for you, what would be completion in this project?
Well, from a practical standpoint, from a resident's point of view, completion would be them back in their apartment. The remediation has taken place. The verification that the remediation was effective was done, the acceptance by resident council, and then the occupation of the resident into that apartment, I think would result in 100% completion of the project. Because it doesn't do any good to have it sampled if you don't have anybody in there. So the bottom line is, so the problem is, we have people in contaminated units. The solution is to decontaminate it and get them back in those units in a safe unit. So that would be what I would suggest to be completion.
Mold has taken over a big part of this conversation, but there are other parts of it, like leaky pipes and cabinets falling off the walls and all of that kind of stuff. Would you include those in your idea about when to get people back in their apartments? Those things should also be repaired and brought up to a code or standard or something like that. Is that included in your idea of completion?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the apartment needs to be habitable so that somebody could live there safely and all the fixtures work, all the appliances work, hot and cold water is plumbed correctly. There's, all the caulking is done correctly. There's no leaking pipes or valves. There's no bulging dining room ceilings. I mean, there were apartments that I went in that you could touch the ceiling and it bulges and it's soft. That all needs to be fixed. And we need to, in order to prevent mold from coming back, they have to address and fix the sources of moisture. And some of it is you stop what's leaking, either coming in through the walls or leaking pipes or coming in from outside somehow. And they need to, for example, in the bathrooms, they need to have the right size exhaust fans so that it's pulling out the humid air that gets trapped in the bathroom and then causes the mold. So all that needs to be addressed in order for somebody to safely inhabit that apartment. Absolutely, not just mold.
Great, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Baumgartner?
Thank you. So what we heard tonight is that there's a difference of opinion on mold remediation. And so, in your eye, you know, I guess my question to Manager Burr is, what would be your position on just the opinion on the mold remediation?
Opinion on testing, or can you specify a little more?
Specifically, there was a comment made this evening that there's a difference of opinion between related as well as tenants' legal representation with respect to mold remediation. In your eye, what would be akin to maybe Councilor Jones's question was to Mayor Hedrick, but what would be satisfactory mold remediation in your eye?
Yeah, and again, prefacing it that I in no way am an expert on mold. My preference personally is I want to assure the tenants that they're getting into a safe environment. I'd like to see, for those units we know that are, have had, tenants with health issues, that type of thing, I would like to see an agreement on how they'll do air testing. It's complicated, but I'd like to see, related come to an agreement on how to do that and proceed personally and ideally.
And for families who are staying in hotels, some of whom, as has been mentioned this evening, been in hotels for over 2 months now, what steps are being taken to ensure that their homes are remediated, if not this week, next week, and certainly not any later? 2 months in a hotel is completely inexcusable.
Well, I think I covered a lot of what they are working on in terms of, they're freeing up those apartments that have been deemed safe and newly furnished or brand new furniture. So that's, the first step to get, if those are deemed acceptable by tenants council, then they have a safe, clean place to move into in the meantime. But there's a holdup until they come to an agreement in terms of actually making the fixes, until you come to an agreement on the testing. So that's got to be figured out.
But why is it taking so long to remediate the unit?
Well, if you can't agree even to, there's, I know one unit where there's no visual or swipe type of testing showing mold, whereas an air test did. So you've got to come to an agreement on that, because for one side, they think it's not an issue, and the other side, they think it is. So they've got to come together to figure that out. That's between their attorneys.
But why would related state it's not an issue?
Because they're following what's generally in the Connecticut guidelines for starting with the, you see some stuff in the pack. That's generally how it's done, is typically the swipe tests or visual tests. Even swipe tests, you saw Mystic Air Quality said even those aren't always reliable. Visual is the main way.
Well,
But-
when Related came to speak to us back in May, they made it abundantly clear, and were very apologetic, that under any circumstance that they would remediate these units, the mold remediation, to the satisfaction of the residents. And if they're reneging on that promise really arguably necessitated our decision to not move forward or even explore holding Related in default of the tax stabilization agreement. So for me, that's a non-starter. If they refuse to remediate the mold to the satisfaction of the residents and their legal representation, that is absolutely grounds to hold Brantford Manor in default of the tax stabilization agreement.
Point of order?
We've been
Decorum.
here for 3
Point of order,
months.
decorum.
All right?
Decorum.
We've been here for 3 months discussing this, and I'm sick and tired of hearing we're working on this. We're doing this. We're trying. We're not trying hard enough.
Decorum.
There are people in.
Mr. Mayor.
Time out. There are people living in hotels, some of whom have children with autism. Okay? No one can understand the pain and struggle that these families are going through. Look, I understand. Yes,
decorum's important in our meetings, but emotions, showing emotions for the people we serve are too. Because not one of us on this table sitting around would want any of us or our families to be subjected to those living environments, period. It ain't right, and we're better for that. Yes, thank you to each and every one of us who have shown up to the meetings. I've been to meetings. Council Bordelon's been to plenty of meetings. Mayor Hedrick's been to meetings. Manager Burt has been in meetings. Yes, on many things we don't always agree, but I think it's undisputed that all of us deeply care about Brantford residents and the conditions they're living in. But my gosh, Related is dragging their feet. And what recourse do we have? We have the power of the purse. We give them, provide them, or allow them to keep $450,000 a year in tax revenues starting this fiscal year. And as the mayor mentioned, $60,000 for the city. And certainly, yes, we wouldn't want to put those, put residents in harm's ways, but my gosh, the status quo ain't working right now. So I apologize if I violated any form of decorum here, but something's got to give, and it's time to get to work.
Motion for a recess, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Baumgartner, I trust you understand that you were just out of order. I understand the high emotions, but I just ask that you refrain from slamming the table in that manner. Councilor Kassiri?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In our June 14th Committee of the Whole, there was a lot of dialogue between ourselves as councilors and representatives of Related Affordable, and I just want to highlight and bring attention to a particular line during that meeting. The president of Related Affordable, Matthew Finkel, stated, "It's going to be a matter of time and getting it done. Brantford Manor is a very large property. It's 446 units. We want to work together. We want to remedy the situation, regardless of what happens with the tax incentive agreement and what you're talking about today, and out looking for blood, for lack of a better term. But moving down that path, I think two things will happen. One, there will be lawyers who will have to get paid a lot of money to fight a battle that doesn't need to get paid. We're here. We're willing to work with you. We want to work with you to resolve these situations. We want to get it done as soon as we physically can, given some constraints we continue to face as we come out of the pandemic." I'm going to be careful how I word this, Attorney Duggan, but based on this statement, do you think it's fair to say that the president was insinuating or at least alluding to that there would be legal action if we were to end the tax incentive agreement?
I think without even commenting specifically on what the president said, I think that ending the tax agreement will invite litigation.
Thank you. Mr. Burt, in a June 27th email, we received notification indicating that Brantford Manor had inspection on 6/22 and 6/23. Brantford received a passing score, but with a list of items that needed to be fixed or remediated. And then we learned in a July 28th email that they had done those things.
Those were the immediate health, safety type issues. I'm sure there's still plenty of smaller things undone.
Right, these were the exigent health and safety deficiencies, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then we learned that Related did complete the exigent health and safety findings, sorry I lost my place, but to provide HUD with written confirmation by July 28th that mold, mildew, moisture, and peeling paint observed by the REAC inspector had been addressed. They indicated in the same July 25th email that they were implementing a systematic inspection process of all units without basements to identify any mold, mildew, or exigent health and safety issues. Have they completed those processes, or are they proactively still completing this process?
They had sent the response once the work was done to HUD. My understanding is HUD came back recently. They're not going to issue a report, but they came just to verify my understanding of what had been done.
Okay. Related also indicated that they were going to hire 3 licensed mold remediation firms to complete remediation of mold. Is Related still utilizing 3 licensed mold firms? Yes. Okay, thank you. Great. There were 8 suspected ACM or asbestos instances. Has Related taken care of the 8 instances of ACM, or are they still proactively removing the ACM instances?
What was that acronym?
ACM is asbestos?
Oh, they're still in the process.
Okay, but they're still proactively trying to remediate. Okay, thank you.
Related has, sorry, go ahead. I apologize.
If you'd like to continue, it's okay.
Related has not stopped. They've continued to, the items that have been brought forward to them, they are addressing those. The items that have been brought forward by the attorney, they are addressing those. The items that have been brought forward by me from the May 6th and from other subsequent comments that I've gotten either off of Facebook or from people, we have a spreadsheet, and they are actively working on those. So they are moving forward. There are a lot of moving pieces there. It is multi-layered and multi-tentacled, and they are, they are working on it. Are they slow? Yep, they are slow, but they are not stopped, and that's my concern.
I realize some of these are repeats, but I just want to make sure I'm going through my list. Thank you. They indicated that all pipe repair and replacements were complete. Have any additional leaks been identified, and thus have they been repaired?
Well, they're still waiting. I mean, all the obvious ones, to my knowledge, had been repaired. But as you know, as I mentioned, Hetty's going through and checking everything, so they're waiting on results. So I'm sure they're still, sorry, do you?
No, go ahead. In addition to that, when John and I did our first inspection, we identified some pipe leaking issues. And we issued a report on that, and they're either repaired or they are working on it. They're not 100% complete on that. I'm waiting on that report.
Okay, thank you. Related stated that they were assessing all existing fans and ductworks. Have they completed the vacuuming and replacements of the ductworks and fan survey? And if not, are they still proactively continuing to do so?
They're continuing to do so. They have not completed that.
Thank you.
They have, I'm sorry.
The test, I think they completed the testing, they said, didn't they?
Right, they completed the testing, but they still have some cleaning to do of the ventilation ducting. And I know that they are replacing some of the fans in the bathrooms because they were undersized.
Okay. As of that writing, relating had installed leak sensors in 66 basements and were continuing to install the remainder. Have they completed that project, or are they still proactively continuing to do so?
I believe that's completed.
Okay.
Did you hear that? I believe it was completed.
In a July 28th email, related indicated that they had hired a third-party advisor, Hydro Environmental Technologies, to assist in ongoing assessment and remediation. Are they still utilizing this third party?
Yes.
Thank you. They also indicated that they have hired a third-party relocation assistance firm, Housing Opportunities Unlimited, to assist in ongoing relocation efforts. Are they still utilizing this third party?
I believe so.
Thank you. Related claims that all remediation work is being completed by licensed environmental firms. Do you believe this to be true?
I believe so.
Okay.
And they also have, as part of HEDI, they have industrial hygienists that are certified industrial hygienists that are actually on scene that are part of this.
And they'll be monitoring the other companies as remediation is done.
Thank you. They also indicated that they are engaging a professional cleaning company to clean the bathroom exhaust vents in each of the units. I believe you touched on this. They're still proactively continuing to do so?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Is Related still proactively attempting to remediate mold or any other safety hazards that the City of Groton, the Fire Marshal's Office, or HUD has determined needs to be fixed?
I believe they're working on all those things.
Great. Has Related indicated that they would not comply with any requests from the City of Groton, the Fire Marshal's Office, HUD, the Town of Groton, or any other authoritative agency over Brantford Manor?
No.
Okay. So it is your belief that Brantford Manor Preservation is still proactively attempting to remediate, fix, and work with the tenants about issues that this council brought up 2 months ago on June 14th during the Committee of the Whole?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Thank you. And all of these items I have just asked about have either been completed or still proactively being completed since the June 14th Committee of the Whole.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Counselor's time has expired.
Thank you.
Counselor Bordelon?
Thank you. My first question is for the city mayor. When's the first complaint that you have in your records of mold at Brantford Manor? Because it's before these dates.
In my record?
Yeah.
The 6th of May when I met at the Rock.
So there's no other records prior to this of complaints of mold in the records of at the city?
Are you asking, okay, when you say my records, are you talking about city records or are you talking about my records?
City of Groton, people complaining about problems at Brantford prior to
There
this.
have been mold complaints in Brantford Manor in the past. It's come into the building inspector, and those have been addressed and adjudicated.
Okay. So, again, so what I'm stating here is $18.5 million went into a building that was identified of having mold way before its first complaint went in, and it still has it. My concern as a taxpayer and the health and well-being of these residents is, how did this building deteriorate that fast if the mold was actually properly remediated? Doesn't sound like it was. That's my concern. My next question is, what's the plan for the city inspector?
I don't understand your question.
What's the plan for the city inspector? What is his role in any of this?
He is accompanying the Electrolyte to address other maintenance and issues and to look for water intrusion.
Because this building was signed off, mold was identified at one of the meetings. You had stated you got called down in the middle of construction and a cabinet had come down and the whole wall was covered black. Is that true? That you stated that at one of the meetings, that you had called in the middle of the renovation?
Yep.
So the mold was present then. So the mold is still present now. If this was my personal home and I paid $18.5 million in remediation, how is mold still present? I don't want to stop by causing a default. I think a default doesn't mean we're going to stop paying the taxes. It just says we're just putting you in default because you are in default. It doesn't mean we're going to start taking the money back or stop, holding them accountable for the taxes. As it was stated by the attorney, it would just be the initial process. They would still have time to work on that. I'm not saying let's start today and take away all the money. I'm saying we should be calling a default where default is due.
Could I just mention?
The handout that was given to us from Ledgelight, dry, clean, pest-free, safe, contaminated-free, well-ventilated. These units, when they were redone, were not made up to code. To me, my opinion is they put a Band-Aid on it and left it. I'm not denying that the guy related came out and agreed that they were 100% at fault. He admitted and he apologized. But if you go back, I think it's 2016 or 18, I don't have the article in front of me, they own a building in Springfield. Guess what they did there? They apologized there too. So this is a track record or trend. If this was like the first incident, I would be like, well, but if you look back at that article, and I will send it if you guys want, or Google the company in Springfield, Mass, and you'll see the building. And it was a slow thing. People were suffering. Stairwells closed. That's not even fire code. So I'm not saying that we should go in and just take the money. I'm saying we should be saying that you are in default. Legally, we should, as a counselor, be saying you are in default because they are. This mold has been around for a while. I looked at some of the city records and it's gone way back, way before this. There's many complaints in Brantford. How many mold complaints would you say you have on file, Keith?
I don't know, you have to look them up.
So you're not sure?
I don't have that record number in front of me.
Yeah. So this is an ongoing issue. And I think if we sit here and we continue to, one of the units I found out they're going to move somebody into, they're going to move them in between two moldy units that have been identified. If you're not remediating L-plex by L-plex, what I mean by this, every unit cleared in the whole L, all 7 or 8, however many are there, remediated fully in its extent, because there's only drywall that separates the basements, only drywall, no cement structure. You're not gonna tell me that these residents aren't afraid to move into an apartment in between two moldy units.
Counselor's time has expired.
As one unit is repaired, the mold could be transferring to the next unit. That's not the plan. That's the plan I want to see. L-plex by L-plex.
Counselor's
That's
time
how
has
you
expired.
remediate, not single unit by single unit. Thank you.
Mayor Hedrick.
I would like to address a couple things. I don't know about you, but I've had mold before and I've cleaned it up, and then conditions later, I get mold in the same place. So when you say that we had mold back in 2016, you're implying that's the same mold that we have now. In the case where I talked to you about last time, in the case that I'll talk to you about now, I have talked to my building inspector who did the inspections, and there have been times that mold, we got called out for mold, we went down there, we stopped work, we had them move cabinets, we had them clean the mold, remediate the mold, we waited the appropriate amount of time, had them wait the appropriate amount of time, then they painted, and then they continued the construction. You were kind of implying that the city issued COs in a moldy situation and that we didn't follow the rules and your regulations and the procedures that we're bound by. That is not the case. I want to make sure that is very clear, that when we issue a certificate of occupancy, it meets all the requirements for that certificate of occupancy. Now, you can have mold in 2016 and you can have mold in 2022, and because of the area that they're in, that mold could be the same type of mold. So that could be what we're dealing with here. So the assumption that the city didn't do that correctly, that is not the case. So the records that you asked about the quarterly completion reports, I reached out to Zach Simmons. He checked his archives. He didn't have it. The reason I asked if they had sent it to the town is because they sent the annual reports to the town. They did not send them to me. We have a lot of records. I am going through the records. Now I have somebody going through the records to look to see if we have those quarterly, can find those quarterly reports. Those quarterly reports would be coming from either related or from the building company. Those records would only be basically their status of, here's the status, here's what we did, those kind of things. Those are not used to certify the buildings or to do the final CO of the building. So the final CO, those are our records. Those are the official records that are used to certify the construction.
Mayor, I just want to point out that Councilor Jones lost power at his
Okay.
house, so as of now, he's not on there.
All right. Councilor Jones has left the meeting at 8:17.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to clarify to his response, if I may.
No, we have other councilors who wish to speak at this point.
Well, he made an assumption of my interpretation. I'd like to clarify, please.
We have 2 minutes,
May I
two
respond,
rounds, 3
please?
minutes each. Everybody has to follow the
May I
rules.
take 2 seconds to respond?
Councilor Borderline, I already answered your question.
I'm asking again, may I speak to that
No.
response? Okay, that's your
Okay.
choice.
Thank you. Councilor McBride.
Thank you. All great comments on a very difficult topic. I just want to provide some thoughts, and I'm looking at this more of a longer term. This agreement is 14, there's 14 more years to go. It's over $7 million of a tax abatement. And although I agree that they seem to be making some headway and making some changes and improvements, I also see some points that they are in violation of the tax incentive agreement. If you look at a couple pages, page 2 talks about they have to provide high quality low-income housing. Page 4, paragraph G mentions the management company will at all times maintain the project in good order and repair and manage and operate the project in accordance with the provisions of all applicable federal, state, and local law in this agreement. So I'm no expert in mold either, but I know there's other issues besides the mold that this company's not providing what they signed up for. Now, I'm not a fan of going to a legal battle either, but is there an in-between that we could put some notice in writing to state that, when we talked last, I don't know why we didn't have just a big Excel spreadsheet, 442 units, list out every single thing that's wrong with each unit, and put a date and time frame when they're supposed to be completed. And then at the end of the day, can't we just send them a letter that states, we're not going to legal battle, but we do know there's issues that you're in violation of, and we want you to correct them by a certain date. Because that's in my opinion, a longer-term approach. They're getting $7-8 million abated to them over time, so why can't we take a long-term approach, not go to legal battle, but have them fix the items beyond the mold? So that's kind of my take. I think there's things we can do without causing legal battles, but to get us moving in that direction beyond the repairs that they're doing right now, because I also agree they're going a little bit slower than what a business should probably be doing that's getting substantial amounts of money. So that's kind of where I'm at. Thank you.
Thanks, coming back on.
And, good?
Good, thanks.
Okay. Councilor Jones has rejoined us. Councilor Baumgarten?
Thank you, and I wholeheartedly agree with much of what you said, Councilor McBride. Just also want to thank Electrolyte Health District for the addendum to the meeting. The complaint status was very helpful. Having a chart here that indicates the complainant's address, obviously the tenant's address, open complaint with Electrolyte Health District, the status, whether it's opened or closed, when the site visit was conducted. or if it was conducted, then obviously the comments. It is helpful, and just getting this information that is just clear and concise is appreciated. So thank you. And as Councilor McBride stated in between, Manager Burke, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't Related and the town and the city amend the agreement a few years after it was enacted?
It was amended when the city switched the way sewers were built. It was amended just for that issue.
So the agreement can be amended for certain
Sure.
issues,
If all three parties agree, yes.
if all three parties agree. So in light of what Councilor McBride stated, if even the council or the town and the city jointly were not comfortable moving forward with holding Related in default of the 30-year tax stabilization agreement, I think that ought to be an option, especially as it relates to what Related can do for the community, what Related can do to open up their community center, which was supposed to be utilized per the exhibits in the tax stabilization agreement for spaces for kids to do homework help. Councilor Parker shared much of what some of the programming was in the past in our previous meeting when we discussed this. So clearly there is a precedent to reopen the agreement, and I think it would be advantageous for both the town and the city to project that much more needs to be done, and the status quo clearly is not working. So again, if we aren't going to use the nuclear option, if you will, let's meet halfway at a bare minimum and seek amending the agreement, reopening it. Do I believe taxes should be abated, to the tune of $7 to $8 million over the length of the agreement of what's remaining? Absolutely not. But with that said, if we can amend it to ensure that also Brantford residents are being heard and that their issues will be dealt with, should this happen in the future, and that's another thing we're not talking about. We can remediate this mold, but what's the path forward? What's going to happen when case is closed? At this rate, it doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon. But in any event, we need to move in that direction, also thinking proactively of what happens next.
Mayor?
The one thing that John and I just recently got is when you go back to Exhibit 2 and you talk about the social services things that they're supposed to provide, we just got confirmation that they are going to give $10,000 to the Mystic Youth Football League here. So,
Just that's separate from that, though. That's through the
right,
foundation.
that's through their
not county
foundation.
grant. Right.
And they're also going to give $500 to Little League. And
5,000.
how much?
5,000.
5,000, sorry, $5,000 to Little League. And they've already offered some financial counseling, and they're looking at doing the other things that are on that list, including providing space to United Way. Jill Rusk has already reached out to them about a food pantry and about space over there. We've reached out to them about space for the police.
And human services.
And human services. So they should provide those by the end of the year.
I believe Director Mansfield had his.
If I may respond to Councilor McBride's comment, I think what he described as getting a list of what's wrong and then go out and making sure it's fixed. It's a common sense approach. That's exactly what we do at Ledgelight Health District. It's standard operating procedure. We get a complaint, we do a site visit, we cite whatever public health code violations they are. We either get voluntary or mandatory compliance through a public health order. So I would encourage everyone who knows individuals at Brantford Manor to contact us, and we can get it done. The spreadsheet clearly shows, there are more than half of the complaints that were provided to us through council that we don't know about, because for whatever reason, they're not reaching out to us, and they haven't said through council or through themselves or through another avenue, hey, I live at 233 Elm Street and I've got mold, can you come out and take a look at it? We encourage anyone to just reach out, tell us, and we'll get it done.
And I had 3 seconds remaining, so I'll use them very quickly. In the case a tenant is afraid to speak out, if they're afraid there will be retribution for submitting a complaint, what recourse would they have?
So if you take a look at the complaint report that
Yes.
I've sent along, everyone
Yes.
has the ability to remain anonymous.
Yes.
They just have
Thank
to
you.
tell us they want to remain anonymous. Now, of course, if they complain about a unit, the unit has a number on it, and then we go out and say, okay, there's chipping and peeling paint, there's excessive mold, there's rodents. We're going to talk to the management company and get them to fix it. If we have to issue a public health order, we'll issue a public health order. It will name the unit. It has to name the unit, or else they won't know where to go. So, but we will keep their information confidential, who made the complaint. So it could be through a third party, it won't be written down. And it's right on our form. It says, the complainant would like to remain anonymous because they have fear of retribution.
Just
Thank you,
added, that's what would be great about something like the tenants union is compiling things to hand over in bulk too, something for the future, so.
A point of clarification, or my question of clarifying, or I don't even know how to put it. People were afraid, so this is like huge that people are even speaking up. They only spoke up because they have help and support now that are backing them, and they were validated. So it's gonna take a while. But if the residents don't, I'm just questioning, or I question the manager and everybody, shouldn't it be the responsibility of the owners to go unit by unit? Like, that's what they should be doing if nobody speaks up. Like, the onus shouldn't be on the people who are already suffering. It should be the onus of the building complex, shouldn't
Thank
it?
you, Councilor Bordelon.
I mean, people were told that they were gonna be kicked out for speaking up. I mean, we have people here that we're afraid. And so I think the onus is the company should be doing that,
Yeah,
first and foremost.
From an organizational perspective, we don't care who calls us. We don't care if it's the property owner, John Burt, Mayor Hedrick.
But
Councilor
wouldn't enough of
Baumgartner?
these complaints be
Councilor
enough
Bordelon.
to make you wanna
Councilor
go into
Bordelon.
all the units already?
Councilor Bordelon.
No, well, yeah, absolutely want to, sure, but we have to think about resources. Every municipality has a limited amount of resources, and to take, for instance, my 12 sanitarians and put them on Brantford Manor, it would leave a huge gap in all the other environmental things we have to do. So, yeah, in a perfect world, go to every house, every rental unit within our 10-town jurisdiction and do a courtesy inspection and cite every violation. Look for covers on trash cans every Thursday throughout our jurisdiction, but there are realistic limits on what we have the ability to do.
My question would be, with a significant number,
Councilor
it
Bordelon.
should warrant
We-
a
Councilor
mandatory
Bordelon.
look-in. But thank
Councilor
you for
Bordelon.
clarifying that it's a
You are out
resource
of
issue.
order.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Councilor Bordelon.
Thank you.
We have 2 rounds.
We only get to
3
speak
minutes
twice.
each.
That's a bad decision.
That's a fact. We only get to speak twice. I ask
If
that
the
you do not
panelists
try
can
to
speak more
speak
than
3
twice,
times.
why can't counselors who are elected to sit up here speak more than twice? That's a poor decision on the council.
Point of order.
Thank you.
Okay.
Doesn't make any sense.
No, there's a point of order here.
Are
Point
there
of
any
order.
other hands?
I have a hand up,
Councilor
and I've
Franco.
also notated a point of order.
Councilor Franco, you have
repeatedly-
the floor.
Repeatedly have been interrupted throughout the night, hearing her while other people are speaking, and it
Okay.
needs to stop.
Councilor Franco, you have the floor.
So, in your opinion, is there any way to get them to move faster with remediation of these apartments? Is there any type of way to push them further? Is it through HUD? Is it through the state representatives, the federal representatives? Is there something we can do to make them go faster to help get this fixed sooner?
Well, as mentioned, Hetty has already given their timeline. As they do those inspections, it takes 6 to 7 weeks to get the report for each one. So I'm not sure there's a way to boost it unless the mayor has some other
Well,
idea.
and that's why I'm reaching out to HUD. I've reached out to Blumenthal's office, reached out to Murphy's office. They're helping some, but I've reached out to HUD directly and trying to set up this meeting with me and John to talk to them about how we can move this faster. Because HUD has the big stick, right? HUD's the one has the money with them, and HUD is the one that can make them move. But also, I asked HUD to do more inspections than 25. If you do 25 inspections, and 10 of those 25, 40% find mold, in the business that I come from, you expand that sample size till you try to boundary this. I didn't do that because that's not what they do. And if you look at the 96 or 98 out of 144, that's 64%. I put that in an email to HUD. And I said 40%, 164%, we have a mold problem. I need your help pushing this forward. So we're finally getting emails back and forth. And the last one was that I gave them my and John's schedule for this week to set up a meeting. So I'm waiting on that. I'm hoping that once we have that meeting, then we can get HUD to use their hammer to push this more forward in a faster pace.
If I may respond to Councilor Franco, and I'll just reiterate, if there is a situation where there's an immediate threat to the health of the resident and it's brought to our attention, we can, within an hour, issue a public health order to the person who owns the property or the organization, whoever is the LLC or whatever it happens to be, and order them to remediate the problem within the specified time frame. We do it every day. So yes, there's a mechanism in place, and everyone should be aware that if there's a public health issue, not a building issue, not a fire code issue, we know about it, we do an inspection. If there's an immediate risk to their health, we issue an order. If they don't comply, we deem it unfit for human habitation. And then the municipalities are responsible for housing those individuals in the short term, and eventually the corporation will be responsible for reimbursing the municipality. So I want to be clear, the mechanism is in place. We just have to know about it. So if you know of a resident who has an immediate issue, they've got to contact us, or have somebody, any of you who know them, contact us and say, here's the address, here's the issue. We'll get somebody out there within a couple days. We have to know about it.
So what you're saying is if they have a mold issue and they call Ledgelight and say, I can't breathe in my apartment, you're gonna go out there and investigate and say this is a health issue, and
I'm going to go out there and investigate and then make a determination of whether it's a health issue. I won't say it's a health issue before we go out there. So yes, absolutely. That's what I'm.
even without standards for mold, is that what you're saying?
Of course. As I said in the beginning, 198206 says we must investigate all sources of filth in our jurisdiction. So
Right.
when we get a complaint, we investigate it. If we determine there's a violation of the Connecticut General Statutes of the Public Health Code, we order remediation.
And have you given them any violations?
We haven't had to issue public health orders because of the few complaints that have made it to our desk. They've been responsive in taking care of them. So we always work for voluntary compliance before issuing public health orders.
So the residents have Ledgelight as somebody they can contact. And what should the residents be doing then? Should they be calling HUD as well? Like, who do they reach out to? I know they're reaching out to the mayor, they've reached out to people on our council. I mean, like, they don't know who they're supposed to be, like, really getting help from. So should they be reaching out to Related? I don't know exactly who they should be reaching out to say, I have an issue. This is what's going in my apartment.
If I may answer, in your packet, it's in black and white who they should, it lists all of the issues that if they have these in their units, they should contact us. Here is the contact information.
So you're the first contact, that's it?
I can't say I'm the first, but we're the agency who can get it done. So I'd reach out to me if I lived there. I mean, I think it's most important to get the communication to the residents that if you're looking to remediate a public health nuisance, call us. Call us directly, and then we'll get it done. I don't know how much clearer I can be about that.
In a perfect world, the residents would be able to call Brantford and say, hey, I have a problem, and Brantford would be responsive and get it fixed. We're not in a perfect world anymore. So people need to reach out to whoever they feel comfortable with. As soon as I get the information, if for example, on May the 6th, I asked people to put their names down, what their issues are, and I forwarded that to Ledgelight so that they could open mold complaints. The next, well, that was on Friday. So on Monday, I forwarded to them on Monday so they could open complaints. And then I gave the list to my building inspector so that we could do inspections to look for maintenance issues. For example, handrails that weren't attached. I mean, one of the inspections that we had, we were gonna go downstairs and John reached for the handrail and the whole handrail fell off. So that was one of the issues. Now, is that happening everywhere? No, it's not happening everywhere. But when we find out about it, we get it addressed and we get it fixed. But it's based on a complaint system, right? I don't get to go down there and knock down doors and say, I'm coming in to inspect you. That's not how it's done. That's government overreach. You wouldn't want it, I wouldn't want it. We need people to tell us, but as soon as we find out, we will get on it. And we've done that. If you talk to people that have gotten in touch with me or have gotten in touch with Ledgelight, they'll tell you that I've reached out to Brantford and said, we got an issue. I send emails and follow up. I make sure John's on it, and they have been responsive. So it is about complaints. I know some people don't like that, but that's how the system works.
Right, because there has to be data, there has to be, you can't just go into people's apartments and, without their, asking for you to come there, I would think, other than the normal inspections that they have to do within Brantford Manor. So basically, we're hoping that HUD will help our community push related to go faster. That's basically what we're hoping for.
They have the biggest stick anyways. If it could be done, they're the ones that can get it done.
All right,
But
so.
at the same time, I'm waiting on them to contact.
Yeah, they've not been really
They-
responsive.
Well, the very first time John reached out to them and asked about the REACT inspection, the
They-
response,
They treated it as a FOIA request. I got it from Brantford the day it was issued, and they gave it to me 6 weeks later.
So federal legislators are the ones that maybe put the pressure on them because the HUD is federal. I mean,
well,
and
Senator Summers has talked to them, Senator Blumenthal's talked to them. When I talked to Murphy's office, they said they were standing back and letting Blumenthal's office take it.
so Blumenthal wants to take the lead on this, is what you're
I
hearing.
think it was a courtesy from Senator Murphy in terms of letting the senior senator who's already involved take the lead.
Right.
So Blumenthal is our federal.
And point of
Local down
information,
there.
he has. He has, not he will, he has.
And then when we're talking about getting the reports from them with a plan, because of course, I think there should be like an investigation on what's going on out there, what's going on with a list of a spreadsheet of what apartments and what's going on in every apartment and what needs to be fixed. I mean, but I think it's as a council, it's our duty to just say, here's, due to the contract, or is it a living, because I don't think that us looking at a spreadsheet, any of us are experts in this field to be able to figure out what to do with a spreadsheet. I think the people that are dealing with this day to day, that's their expertise and they should be dealing with those type of things. And then they tell us, are they living in healthy communities, a community or not? And if not, then we need to go from there. I mean, we're hearing from people in the community repetitively coming to us saying they're having issues. So to get this fixed, I just want it done sooner than later, and I don't think taking away the contract at this time is the right move, because then it will take us out completely, would just shut down communications altogether. And then that's even less people fighting for them.
Counselor's time has
Thank you.
expired. Any other hands? Counselor McBride?
Thank you. I'm just going to get back to, do we have a listing between all of the agencies and the departments of all the issues that we're aware of? I mean, you have a good listing, but it doesn't include like the maintenance items. Do we have that listing anywhere? Can we develop that?
We've, of course, some things have gone directly to the building department of the city. Brantford keeps a spreadsheet of issues that have been logged with them. They provided the updated one about 2 weeks ago. So we do get that.
We do have, okay. And Attorney Duggan, would there be any issue with, if the council decided at a future date to send a letter of some sort stating that these are the items that we found problematic that need to be fixed, or we're going to take action in the future? I mean, is there some manner that we can do something but not cause legal issues?
I'll do the wishy-washy response of, it'll depend on what the circumstances are at the time. So, again, the contract itself talks about whether or not they're, progressing diligently towards fixing the problem. We can certainly, raise that, as an issue, or ask or require that they continue to do this in a diligent manner. But I think we'd have to be careful about the wording in any of that. And I guess it's a little bit hard to evaluate too, at least just from what I've read with the heady materials and such, that when they talk about, they have to do an individualized assessment of each apartment. That wasn't kind of in my radar screen initially, when we were talking about this, thinking, oh, they're going to do this broad overview and they'll have this plan and boom, it can get done. Looking at that, and I'm assuming that heady is reputable, et cetera, for the moment, it just struck me a little bit as, ooh, this is a little bit different from perhaps what I had imagined earlier, that they have to go in and do an individualized assessment, which kind of intuitively makes sense, even from the comment before about, if you have one moldy apartment here, one moldy apartment here, how does this work in the middle? I guess, they really do have to evaluate things on an individualized basis. So, sorry, long and short, happy to cross that bridge when we get there and sort out what we can and can't do.
Thank you.
Councilor Kassiri?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Did the tenants have an attorney the last time that the contract was amended?
Not that I know of, but I wasn't here. I guess I was here for the amendment, but.
Because I don't think it was a tenant issue.
Right, okay. Does legal counsel now being involved affect the ability to amend?
Well, the parties to the agreement really are still the three entities. So I'm not sure necessarily of what standing they would have. I'm sure things would be taken into account.
Okay.
But I don't know that they would have the standing to be at the table.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I make a recommendation to request a third round?
Do councilors want a third round of speaking?
Yes.
Not seeing a majority there. So we've completed our 2 rounds of speaking. Thank you, both Electrolyte and the city, for being here, presenting. It's very helpful for the residents to understand what's going on in Brantford. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Can we have a recess?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Can we recess?
Thank you, John. Thanks.
Sure. We'll have a 10-minute break. Be back at 8:54.
right in.
Recording in progress.
We're back from recess at 9:05. On to Connecticut Communities Challenge. Request to apply for round 2 on page 60. I believe we have Director Reiner here.
Still Andrew?
Reiner.
That's still Andrew. He's on there, as well as Paige Brown.
Good evening, everyone. Are you ready for us?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, so good evening, everyone. John Reiner, Director of Planning and Development Services. Paige and I are here tonight to talk to you about the Community Challenge Grant. We spoke to the council about this item back in April of 2022, and we're approaching the second round of this grant that the state is putting out. This round, they're looking to award basically the remaining $55 million. We saw what they was awarded for the first round of this grant, and really the focus that DPCD has for this is an economic development grant looking to create jobs, permanent jobs, grow the grant list, and really have an impact in the municipalities that they're awarded. They're again looking for shovel readiness projects, capital coming from both private and non-state public investment, as well as public matching dollars going into this grant project. After that April 12th presentation that Paige and myself presented to the council, that evening we spoke about our focus area was really the Route 1 corridor due to a lot of our existing plans, the Plan of Conservation and Development, the Quonic Bridge village guidelines, focusing growth and development in that area, as well as a significant amount of investment that we see happening in that area through the town CIP funding, Arpa funding, and also some private investment. After that April 12th meeting, we put together an internal staff group and have been reaching out to developers up and down the corridor, property owners, looking for partners on who has near or shovel-ready projects, as well as projects that are ready for them to invest their own private capital in. We have two pretty solid private developers that are looking to partner with us, and we're trying to link up one or two others, those being the Bridges development, the massage school redevelopment, as well as the barn redevelopment at 13 Fort Hill Road. Again, the specifics of these projects are still being refined, as are some of the challenge funds that we would be looking for from the matching public side, things that we'd be looking to do for projects themselves. But basically, again, this grant is something that's looking at both public and private investment, public-private partnerships, and not only would we be looking to invest on the private side, but also public infrastructure along Route 1, which could include private developer assistance, brownfield remediation, implementing the recent Complete Streets policy and mobility improvements, possible investments in transit-oriented development, and to enhance our essential infrastructure that facilitates future development along that corridor. So what does this mean from a grant request? We're still putting our budget numbers together. The grant is due, I believe it's October 7th, and right now we're looking for somewhere to apply somewhere between $6 and $9 million, and that would be matched with funds that are already allocated to the town CIP, Arpa, and then some other federal funds that we're directed towards the town. We think that we have a very good competitive advantage at this point in time. We are one of the distressed communities, so that gives us a leg up and also reduces our matching fund requirements. Again, I can't stress enough that this is still pretty conceptual, and we still have to work out some of the real specifics on the project as we're preparing the grant applications. But Paige, I don't know if there's anything more you wanted to interject prior to us answering any council questions.
Just a couple comments, thank you. I think that provides a good synopsis of the program, but the notice of funding that the state had provided, some of the bullets from that, I just have to read quickly, at the top of the list, it says successful projects will likely include multiple of the below elements: transit-oriented development, downtown major hub development, essential infrastructure, housing, mobility improvements, and public space improvements. As listed, this is very much an economic development program. The state is looking for return on investment. They're demanding that there actually be a match. And then also in the first round, a number of communities had received funding, and the funding was not small, it was fairly significant. Hartford received $6.3 million, Middletown $4.5 million, New London on the other side of the river, they received nearly $6 million, and their ask was $9 million. So this is not a small project or a small ask, it's a transformational ask. They're asking for heavy lifts, partners, those who are actually able to get something done. Actually, those projects that are close to the shovel ready will receive the highest priority.
Thank you. All right, I'll make a.
Again, one other kind of last little tidbit. We did recognize back, even before April, before we came and spoke with the council, that there would be a second round for this. We were preparing for that round for the last number of months. We did finally get the notice of funding available. It was released August 1st, and kind of a tight turnaround on October 7th. So that's why we're coming to talk to you tonight to just further get some direction from the council, and also looking for the go-ahead to apply for this grant, and for that to be voted on at the September council meeting, so that we can work on it for the remainder of the month of September and get it ready for that October submittal date to the state. They were also accepting applications prior to that too. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll make a motion to recommend a resolution authorizing the town manager, John Burr, to execute any and all documentation needed to submit the Connecticut Communities Challenge Round 2 grant application and to accept the funding if awarded. So moved.
Second, Bordelon.
Moved by Melendez, seconded by Baumgartner. Councilor Bordelon.
I think Franco might have had her hand up before me, Councilor Franco.
Councilor Bordelon, you have the floor.
I'm willing to let her go if you feel, she can go. She was ahead of me, actually. So.
Councilor Franco, you have the floor.
Thanks. I had brought this forward quite a while ago as a referral, basically, and I had discussed it with the council, saying this was a referral that our council would have to work on, and we'd have to, there would be a lot of decisions to be made, and we'd have to work together. And I'm noticing in this that it's due on October 7th, and I know that we've had the initial discussion on it, but there really hasn't been anything that's come to us for us to make any decisions on what we want to be done. And it looks as though this area has been chosen because it fits a criteria, but I'm not actually seeing anything specific in here. And I thought we would have a little bit more dialogue about this. And I know our meetings have been full and we can't fit anything into our meetings and they go very late. But I was just hoping that this would be something that we would have a lot more say in and collaborate more on. Can you please give me more specifics on what your vision is here? Because I noticed that the Roger development where the massage school is there, where it used to be the massage school, and the barn, and in this vicinity, looks like that might be your area that you've identified. Can you give me more details?
Sure, and I'll let Paige jump in if I kind of leave any gaps here. But really, the project area is going from the east, starting basically at Sutton Park, as we travel west to the intersection of Route 1 and 117. We'll continue west along Route 1, but we're going to shoot north up to Grasso Gardens, and then continue west basically to possibly even as far as the Drostic Drive area, but I think we're probably going to end up cutting it off somewhere in the Buddington Road area, or a little bit after the massage school, which we're still trying to refine the exact kind of end point of the project based on what other partners may or may not come forward. So kind of a big area, and let me tell you a few of the things that we're looking to do in that corridor. Again, we're still trying to refine these, working on some cost estimates with Public Works, our Parks and Rec department, but some brownfields cleanup on the town property that abuts the massage school, streetscape improvements, the complete streets policy, basically trying to implement that along the entire corridor, sidewalk and intersection improvements throughout that corridor that will create walkability, better connectivity, as well as getting some parcels that may be developed in the future or that might get spurred investment in the future. We have a community connectivity plan for that area. There's a couple of CIP projects that have been identified. We would look to implement those CIP projects with this funding versus town funding. The wayfinding signage program, public art, gateway improvements, and beautification through that corridor. Again, the specifics, still working on those. Looking to do streetscape improvements from Route 117 Route 1 up to Route 117 to Grasso Gardens, incorporating the library and some connectivity to the Claude Chester site, no matter what happens for the revitalization of Claude Chester for that, which we'll be talking to the council about sometime in the next couple of months. We want to make sure there's good connectivity to that site and through that site. This is also an area in town that I think we really want to focus on improvements in equity. That's something that we can't stress enough. I think I've said streetscapes along Route 1 and North Road at that intersection, and building out the sidewalks all along Route 1, which our Public Works Department has been looking to do over the past number of years. So that's some of the public side improvements that we'd be looking to do, not to include that, but also not limited. We're still looking to identify some additional projects, both with Public Works and our Parks and Recreation Department. On the private side of that development, we're again talking about those shovel-ready or close to shovel-ready projects. So the massage school, there's a phase 3 development that they want to do on that property. At the barn, which they've done, so phase 3 would include some housing as well as retail or restaurant space at the massage school. At the barn property, they've built out a good portion of the site, but there's still some additional improvements that they're looking to do, a rooftop deck in the back, a kitchen on the facility, helping to fund some of that initiative through this grant. It should also be mentioned that all of these grant awards, the grant awards that range somewhere between $1 and $10 million. There's a requirement that all awards over $1 million, which this would fall into, require paying prevailing wage for all the construction and development on the project. So that's kind of a little bit more specific, but again, we're still trying to capture a few more pieces here and still trying to set up some partners. We've spoken to many property owners along the corridor trying to get more private investment, and some just aren't ready, some can't come up with the capital, or some have some plans that just aren't quite right at this point in time.
And just to point out that you did look all the way
I
down.
hope that helps a little bit.
And I think you were talking to people all the way down to the downtown area on Route 1, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, they just weren't.
Yes, initially, initially we were looking to connect it all the way down to Drostic Drive, or even a little bit further to the west, but there really wasn't a lot of opportunities for matching shovel-ready projects within that corridor combining with the improvements that we're looking at. So we felt that this was a strong corridor that also needs reinvestment. The town, through a number of our existing initiatives, as well as some of the Arpa funding, things that we're doing at Sutton Park, at Pequannock Plains Park, at the community center, at the library and senior center, kind of the whole municipal complex area, as well as the investment we've seen from the private side recently between the Village of Block Point, the barn, the massage school, and some of the other small businesses in there. We thought this would be a great catalyst to help drive even more focus and redevelopment into this corridor and improvement.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So do you think our odds of being recognized, one, because we're a distressed community, but also what you're discussing here, is that enough to bring enough jobs into our community that it would give us enough points to score well in this grant application?
We hope so. I think it will be jobs. I think, Paige went through that list of the key points that the challenge grant, the successful projects, will include multiple of the below elements in that notice of funding. We're trying to hit every single one of those if we can. And we think by hitting those pieces, as well as making some sites that aren't quite yet shovel ready, ready for future investment, we think that's going to help work really well in our favor, as well as the natural job growth that we have in the area due to our major employers and some of the investment that we're already seeing in Groton.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Councilor Bordelon?
Thank you. So on here, it also states that it could support affordability and accessibility of local workforce, as well as, you said you covered the brownfields, so the one that's right by the massage school is the one that you're identifying as possible remediation?
I don't know if you heard it. Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if that was a question. Yes.
And then what would our plan be once it's remediated? Do we have a plan yet for that, or are we just kind of, obviously any remediation is good because it's right next to a water source, so.
So the site is right next to the massage school. That property owner has noted some interest in working with us to do some public improvements on that property. So I think we can look at that depending on the level of improvement and cleanup that we do on the site. I think, again, those are all things that will get flushed out as we move forward.
Yeah, because it also states here public space improvements, which is a huge key factor. I was just thinking of like Clodchester and the other properties that we haven't really fully decided. Would this money be able to be used for that?
Because we don't have a plan for Clodchester at this point in time, we don't see this money being utilized for that. But could we do improvements, again, along that corridor? Yes. Will we be talking in our grant application about the public visioning process that we've begun for the Clodchester site, and that there will be some level of reuse of that site, public reuse? Again, it's something that we'll mention, but we don't have a definitive end use for that, so that one's still a little further out.
Also, it says,
and accessibility to the public spaces through the use of sidewalks too is something that we're really stressing in the application.
Great, because also, we have Pequannock Plains in that area that is, it was built a while ago, but it needs improvements. One of the things I had brought forward was having the walk space resurfaced, maybe some solar lights on the walkway, and even our concession stand building is starting to need repair. Is there any thought of any funding to help, beautify that area?
So once again, this project, this grant, it's focused on economic development. There's some public space improvements that we can do, public art projects, but it's not really a public recreation and something that we should be looking for to improve things of either deferred maintenance or other projects along those lines. So I think we start getting into a little bit more of a slippery slope if we're looking at public park project improvements, getting too deep into that. So there's a lot of things we can do for public infrastructure, but we have to relate it somehow to how that's going to then translate to economic development.
Yeah, I just think with COVID and all, the walking park was used, and so on here, I was just wondering, it says public space improvements that provide amenities to the community. So that would be a huge amenity for folks. Also, the other thing that, we keep talking about Brantford and the lack of low-income and affordable housing. I know that, affordable housing is 80% of the median income of the town, which is $68,000 roughly, and low income is 60% of the median. It also states in here that money could be used for affordable housing, which we are lacking. It's not spread out evenly throughout the town. Is there any thought on any of that helping to improve that in those areas?
So one of the matching projects that we're going to be talking about is the CDBG application and the funding request for Grasso Gardens to be doing improvements at Grasso Gardens, but we do not have a partner at this time that is looking to build new affordable housing.
They have indicated, though, they're interested in adding a third section there. And John and I have met with the director there, Rob Capoletti.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
That would not be a
section
part
where?
of this.
That couldn't be brought into
At Grasso Gardens.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not, they don't really even have a design for that yet.
Yeah, it's
So
not
again, this
shovel-ready.
project, this grant, shovel ready.
And is there any other identified brownfields on this stretch besides the one that was been identified tonight?
Don't know of any.
That's the only one that we've identified to this point.
And I remember at one point, I think it was Deb Jones maybe that provided a list of brownfields, and there's only a small handful in town.
I mean, I too feel like I thought that this was going to come a little bit sooner to us to be able to kind of go through it and work through it, not kind of here's what the areas we selected and now let's kind of pick it and move it forward. So I think it's important that we're involved a little bit earlier. So kind of disappointed in that part. I mean, I think it's great. I think anytime we can apply for any funding, it's a great opportunity. But I do think the council should have some invested responsibility in talking with the economic development team to kind of, see where the direction's going, throw in some input, and kind of have some direction. And we haven't had an update on this or anything. And so I just urge that we kind of, bring this forward a little sooner. Thank you.
Councilor Parker?
Thank you, guys. I know it's a short turnaround. Most grant processes are a short turnaround. So this just opened up on August 1st. This is the first opportunity they've had to bring to us because we have had other things on the agenda. So I thank you guys for trying to work out what we can do in this short amount of time, even though Councilor Franco brought it up. But we had to wait until this was open. When grants come out, you have to jump on as soon as you can. And we have a process where it has to be brought to us to apply for it. So they're bringing it to us, so I'm all for them going for it. My question is, how often does this grant come around? Is it just the 2 rounds in a year, or is it like, or I should say quarterly? Does it happen quarterly, or is it just only twice a year?
No, so this was a new grant. They had a first round. They've announced the second round. And if there's any funding left, they may have a third round. And then that's it. So this is kind of one of those once in a lifetime opportunities. Again, we came to the council initially to talk about this back in April, focusing on that Route 1 corridor. And we've been working diligently to try to make these connections and find projects that are shovel ready and get some redevelopment in this corridor.
So my other thing is most grants, or some grants, especially with the federal, you have to have a matching grant part. So say that we have to have, or the people shovel ready, I'll use that example. You have to at least have $1 million already in hand before you get the $1 million from them. So if a lot of people are not shovel ready or have that capital up front, they're not going to be able to apply for their grant. So the fact that there are 2 that are available to get started, it's a great time to do it. And I thank them for stepping up and you guys working with them. Thank you.
I just wanted to point out that the planning staff, I don't wanted to come here earlier. However, the private partnership is the linchpin of this. And it's taken to now to get those, which basically narrowed it right down to what you could do. So, you know, they would have loved to have come here earlier, but there's just not many shovel-ready projects out there.
Councilor Baumgartner?
Yes, thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. Question regarding the ask. So obviously, you know, pinpointed a $6 to $9 million ask. You know, and as you indicated, other municipalities have submitted an ask of that amount as well. So aiming high, I think that's something we can all agree on. Just in terms of the actual projects being spent, or dollars being spent on specific work, most of those dollars you anticipate will be allocated towards infrastructure improvements?
So we're thinking about half will be going towards infrastructure, town type improvements. The other half could be going towards private development.
So just in terms of the criteria that they use for the grant, where, in terms of the private development, where would that kind of fall under?
I'm not following the question.
Just in terms of the scoring criteria, you know, or the elements, so some of the elements I read: transit-oriented development, it is all you mentioned, downtown major hub development, essential infrastructure, housing, mobility improvements, public space improvements. Which of those elements would, or categories would the private development fall under?
Sure. So those would fall under, the private could fall under downtown and major hub development. Some of it will be essential infrastructure that'll be on their site as well as off-site. There could be some housing. There will be some mobility and public space improvements. So there's a number of things that it could fall under.
And I understand.
Again, we're still trying to work out the key components of that.
And if memory serves me correct, last year the town submitted a grant to the state. We believe the council gave approval for the grant. Unfortunately, the state did not select us. This was for the site remediation for the former gas station, which is next to the massage center. So do you anticipate any of those dollars, should we be awarded, be used for brownfield remediation of that site?
Yes, we do envision that dollars will be used for the brownfield remediation of that site.
And is the logic of that unleashing additional land to develop housing, or ideally mixed use housing?
So most likely that site would not be allowed to, it's possible it could get cleaned up to be utilized for housing, but we envision possible public space there, possible parking and other amenities for the corridor. So we're still trying to figure out the end plan for that site, but we do know that the brownfield remediation on that site, our last estimate was somewhere in the ballpark of about $600,000.
That's great. I think to any extent we can obviously incorporate, you know, green spaces or you know, recreational spaces for people to enjoy, but also, you know, the emphasis on housing, developing housing along that corridor. What you didn't mention tonight was the Bluffs Village, which is a new development in the last couple of years, just behind, or I guess across the street from The barn just behind the Human Services Building, what used to be just an empty field, is now, I believe, 12 to 18 units of, townhomes, which I think is wonderful. So you're seeing a mix of new development, or housing development down there, and you can see the vitality. There's a lot more foot traffic down there. There's a lot more people, and that is precisely what we need here in Groton. So I truly commend you gentlemen for coming forward with this proposal. I do support it. I would, though, overemphasize the importance of housing, and if we can kind of continue incorporating that, as Council Bordelon stated, though, one condition in this grant, should any of those dollars be used for housing, is that if there is a net addition of 10 or more residential dwelling units for rent, a portion of those units must be deed restricted for 30 years. And I do think that ought to be explored, especially as we're continuing conversations with the developer for the massage center, especially if the housing that they do develop expands as a result of the investment for the brownfield remediation. So I do think that would be considered and would certainly have my support. But I also want you gentlemen to be aware of an additional grant opportunity that just expired. It's for the Community Investment Fund. It's $875 million that will be set aside for the next 5 years that distressed municipalities like Groton can tap into. The first round has just closed. The deadline ended on July 25th, but because it is a 5-year program, they'll obviously continue to accept applications in the future. So obviously this is, we should make this ask, but just keep that in mind, especially as, we're thinking about other areas in town that ought to get the type of, attention that obviously, the Fort Hill or Pequannock Bridge neighborhood will be getting. So thank you again for your work, and if you have any response or wrap-up questions, my time has expired.
Oh, well, thank you. We've actually already met a few times internally to talk about the Community Investment Fund. We did meet with some representatives of the city, the town manager, to talk about some opportunities in the city as well as in the town, because that's also a very large grant project that is ongoing for a number of years with a lot of money focused on distressed communities. So we'll be coming to talk to the council about that one in the future. Going back to this Community Challenge grant, we do want to do the best that we can. We do understand the need for more housing in this area. There is the balance between private developers and building housing without the funding to guarantee that affordability piece. So that's always a little bit of a tricky part, asking the private sector without a huge subsidy to just build affordable housing, especially affordable rental housing. But it's something that we do see a need for within the region.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Kassiri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to clarify, and maybe I misheard you in your opening, but did you state that there were other potential projects besides the barn and the Rogers development?
Yes, there's one or two others that we're still working on some details on those, but they're not quite ready for prime time yet, so I don't have those completely flushed out. And with that said, even both of these projects, both the barn and with the Rogers at the massage school, in the end, one of these could possibly not even pan out. So this is what we have right now that we're starting to move forward with. Both have been very good partners and developers within the community, but it is a pretty restrictive grant of what it puts on the private sector. So that's something we're still kind of working through all the pieces and the estimates. And we hope that we can pull it all together over the course of the next 6 weeks or so.
And did you say there were 2 other potential projects?
1 or 2 others.
Okay. And do you see those working out, or are they still really too early to tell, or?
One of them I think has a better chance than the other. And there's still some soft feelers we have out there, but I think at this point in time, the most I could see is getting 2 other private partnerships I think we're most likely probably looking at 1.
Great. Well, thank you for that info. And as the experts, in your opinion and your staff's opinion, this is the best area or location in Groton for this grant application. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for all of your...
I
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you. I was just going to say, I think it's a great area for the town to reinvest, as well as we have willing partners, as well as the town is directing a lot of funding into this area in the short term. So I think that's what really makes this such a ripe area for this grant and can be really transformative in a positive way.
Great.
John, if I could just add one point to that, sorry to interject. One of the other reasons why we selected this, other than our focus in downtown and partnerships, but the Shoreline East study has definitely gotten traction. Within the state's legislation itself, it actually specifies there will be a train station in Groton in the downtown. So the first bullet in the NOFA talked about transit-oriented development. Those discussions are ongoing. Now it's going to be a while before we have this train station. However, we clearly plan on hanging our hat on that and adding that language within the proposal.
Great. Thank you both and your staff for all of their hard work on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Bordelon?
Thank you. I can appreciate, obviously the project at the old massage school is not complete yet, so I'm not familiar with the owners or the vision fully yet. But I can speak on the barn that I have been there. The owner is amazing, and the vision and the thought there has really gravitated people to that area. I often go downtown Mystic to different shops and things with friends, and I talked to a lot of the people traveling through, and it was interesting when I was in Westerly that someone was like, "Oh, have you been to the barn?" And I was like, "Wow, like you're talking about something out my way." That was really cool. That wasn't downtown Mystic. So it's really exciting. And even when you're facing the building to the left, you can see some changes happening in that building. I saw some new paving down there recently. I wasn't sure if you knew what was possibly going in there or what the changes may be, or if they could benefit from this.
Sorry, which site was that you were talking
The
about?
building directly to the left, before the
As you're facing the building,
yep,
if you're looking from the street?
Yeah, before the salon.
It's a barber shop.
Yeah, they're doing some improvements there. They've received some approvals. Off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly what it was.
Okay. Yeah, it just would be.
I think it was some other retail space there.
Yeah, I see that they're investing in the wildflower. I mean, so I
Yeah.
just hope that we're kind of looking at all of the new development in that area. I know that this came before us before, and we said there would be other opportunities, possibly for grants. And so I'm hoping in the future, I know there is a small deadline, but if we think there's a possibility of a third round, sometimes for me, I get lost in the vision of where we're going sometimes. And so we should be starting now thinking about what if we get the money for the third round, where do we want it to go? And let's start talking about that now. And that's kind of what I was kind of hoping when I was saying, I understand there's a deadline, but it would be great when we have the first round, we should already be predicting our second and third round, kind of where we're going. And I don't know where we're going on the third round yet. And I feel like we should already have that information. So I think that's awesome. And, but once again, opportunity to get secure funding is always a great opportunity. I just want to make sure that we're picking the best areas in Groton too. And I really do think with the train station coming in and everything else, definitely sidewalks are lacking largely now with the barn there and the hair salon. You're seeing a lot of foot traffic between Dairy Queen and around that way, and there's no sidewalks. So I'm hoping that will be part of the improvements, and definitely affordable housing. We need affordable housing, newer affordable housing in that area. And we do not have that in our town. Is anything that's current and new that accepts women and children versus just affordable elderly housing, which is also lacking. So thank you.
Councilor Franco?
Thank you. So the Quantic Bridge Village, as they now call it, is, and the presentation that was made at the library is where I got the vision for starting the beautification committee. And as somebody who grew up in Quonic Bridge, I heard the presentation and the questions that were being asked about to the community of what they wanted to see in that area and what type of buildings and infrastructure and things of that nature. And I had a really hard time envisioning it simply because I had grown up there and not much has changed in that area in all these decades. So I had talked to another counselor and they had said, you know, you'd be amazed at the changes that could happen from like sidewalks and lighting and from, you know, putting up, you know, plants and trees and how it could change an area. And that's what I'm hoping that this will help with in changing the area. And that's where I got the vision for the beautification committee, and that's why it seems like most of our projects are focusing on this area. And to give it a, I guess, to change people's outlook of that area of town and the way they think about it. And so I do hope that this, we can get funding for this. And in this area, I've gone to many meetings within the community and heard residents, as you have as well, of what they'd like to see in this area. So I really hope we get the grant money and we can change and revitalize that area of town. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor McBride?
Thank you. I'm in favor of this. This is very exciting. New housing units for the Rogers development and the barn, and I appreciate the detail on the kitchen and the rooftop facility. As I said, I'm in complete support of this, but it seems to be a couple of councilors had some questions on more details and more involvement from the council. So I just wanted to ask a question. Would it be possible we move forward with this and have more details at the council meeting that the council can approve or would we be able to receive more details? Because this isn't due until October 7th. Could the council approve it with more detail, more involvement of the council at the October 4th meeting? So I'm just questioning if that's feasible, because it seems like there's a desire for a little more involvement from the council. I didn't know if that's possible.
It's possible. The tricky part is come October 4th, we're going to be, the grant should be done at that point in time. Also, the trickier part with that is, so if we're going to be getting a grant application to the council to review, it's due to the council about a week beforehand to get ready for the packet. So it puts a little bit more of a time crunch and pinch on us, which we're already in to get this grant finalized. So at that October council meeting, if the council's looking to change things at that point in time, it's going to be next to near impossible for us to flip that around if there's major changes to the grant. Or, I mean, at that point, we can just pull it and not apply.
No, I'm in complete favor of applying. I just didn't know if there was more wiggle room on involving the council more on some of the decisions, but it sounds like that's not that feasible. So thank you for the explanation.
We love to get more input on this stuff. We always want more buy-in. The council agendas have been really full and tough to get on the agendas. So, that plays into it. And because it's just such a tight turnaround on this grant, as well as many grants, that's why, we like to talk to you about these types of projects and other things that we're working on so that we can try to always have a little bit of a pulse of the council as well as our planning and zoning commission on the direction that we need to go in, because often we get these opportunities to work on these grants and hey, it's due in 3 months, and the council process to get things approved is, a month or so. So that in itself just really hamstrings us on how we apply for things.
John, how locked in are you on the finer details? You put money in there for complete streets, but once let's say we were funded, can that be flushed out further and some input at that stage?
Yeah, I mean, we're still working on that. I think we're going to be, we're going to work with Greg at Public Works to refine our numbers as much as possible. Are we going to have the complete design of that done? No. I think it's going to be more, for example, $500,000 for complete streets between Sutton Park and the Route 117, Route 1 intersection going north to Grasso Gardens, and then $500,000 for sidewalk infill and improvements from 117 and 1 down to this area. So we're going to have basically buckets of money. See, using buckets are Arpa. I don't want to confuse people with that, but basically buckets or pots of money allocated towards all of these individual projects, improving the Pequannock Bridge walkway and rebuilding the gazebo. I don't know, that might be $100,000. So kind of going down the line for a number of those types of projects, yet not having fully designed all of those projects, nor having fully vetted each component of the improvements of those. And that's something that we'll certainly have to do. And as we take it through, work with the council on the design element of those.
Right, including, some of that will have to go through the Complete Streets Committee at that point. So I think there'll be more opportunity for input as we go.
Yeah,
So
I mean, right now, we're looking to identify the projects and the money while we have a number of shovel-ready or concept ideas for things that we want to do from a policy perspective for the town. And then the finer details of the design and the specifics, that's something we'll be able to work with the Complete Streets Committee. Some things might require Planning and Zoning Commission approval, council approval. There might be some easements and combination of access ways along certain properties. There could possibly be, the improvement of the town hall parking lot, as well as the human services parking lot that could be used for overflow parking for that whole, commercial district, as if it becomes more vibrant and more used as a mixed use center as time goes on. So those are things that we're looking to incorporate into the project. But again, we haven't designed those yet.
I guess just a follow-up. So when the council votes in the first week of the September 6th, you will have additional details of dollars, or that will come after? I'm just trying to get an understanding of how much more detail we'll have.
Yeah, I hope to have some more dollars. Any more detail that we can get between now and then, we will certainly share with the council. We'll try to put some things together, but, understanding every week we're putting a lot of time into this and things are getting more and more refined as time goes on.
No, I understand. It'd be great if the council had the ability to approve with some estimated ranges, that's all, just helpful. So thank you for that.
I just have a point of information.
What's your point of information?
I was just wondering, does this have to go, I guess for the town manager, does this have to go to the RTM?
If we were awarded it, not beforehand. We don't
Not
go
beforehand.
beforehand.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other hands? Okay. Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Carries unanimously, 9 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstaining.
Just under the wire.
On to Wolfbrook property update on acquisition, page 74. I believe Director Reiner.
Okay, so,
yes, thank you.
So again, I'll jump into this one. So just giving the council an update on this, and also looking to move along a couple of the technical elements on this. So again, the council approved the acquisition of the 161-acre Wolfbrook property over on Knowing Ledyard Road. We did receive a large grant from DEEP on this. We've also received a contribution or a commitment to contribute from GOSA for $210,000. The town of Groton is contributing $220,000 on this. And we have worked with other partners and have secured the additional funding as required for the purchase of this property. So we're good to go on that element. We're working with the staff at DEEP on the survey and the draft easement. and going through the easement and the documentation that DEEP is going to require. So in the referral, it refers to back as a condition of the 2003 site plan approval for this property, which has expired. There was an Army Corps of Engineers permit for an active adult development community. And as part of that Army Corps permit, there was a conservation easement over a portion of that 161 acres. The easement was designed to protect Eccleston Brook, its associated wetlands on the property. All the local and federal permits have expired and that development was never built, but that conservation easement was recorded and was deeded to the town. In order for the state to move forward with giving us the $352,000, they are requiring the release of that conservation easement, which would be contingent upon the town of Groton acquiring the property. So in order to move this forward, the council first must refer the acquisition of the property and the release of the conservation easement to the Planning and Zoning Commission for a report as required by Connecticut General Statutes 824, and then also to vote to release the easement on this property, subject to, I want to make that a very strong subject to the acquisition of the property and the recording of a conservation easement on the property. So happy to answer any questions on this, but we're very happy with the progress we've been making towards this acquisition.
Councilor Baumgartner?
Yes, I'll make a motion to recommend a resolution to refer the acquisition of the Wolf Brook property and the release of the conservation easement subject to the purchase of the property to the Planning and Zoning Commission per Connecticut General Statute Section 8-24, and to authorize the town manager to sign and execute and deliver such release instruments and other documents reasonably necessary to carry out this request, all subject to review by the town attorney as to form and legality. So moved.
Second, Bordelon.
Moved by Baumgartner, seconded by Bordelon. Would you like to speak also?
Yes, I'm in full support of this motion. Thank you, John, for your continued work on this. Obviously, our council approved the purchase of this property back in 2020. It's been on our radar long before then as well, and just appreciate your persistence. I know it's gone through a lot of hoops, if you will, but you know, obviously these things are complicated and for, you know, perhaps for a reason, but you know, knowing that should we secure this property, you know, 161 acres of pristine open space will be protected in perpetuity. It gives me just a great joy. So my question is, I understand GOSA has committed additional funds to complement the grant award, and that amount is $210,000. Was that the amount that our, just to clarify, our council was aware of when we first approved the agreement?
Yeah, so at one point in time, yeah, I think that 210 has been the number that's been on the table from GOSA all along. There was actually at one point in time where they had offered some additional funding if there were some other federal requirements due to the Build Back America bill, which didn't end up coming to fruition. So they're still happy to contribute the $210,000 towards the purchase price.
Absolutely. And again, the fact that we've successfully negotiated with the property owners, you know, is, I think, is something to be commended. It's certainly not easy. I don't know if in my lifetime the town of Groton has proactively acquired open space. So that's something to be very proud of. And this is acreage that is truly irreplaceable. You look at a map of Groton and it sticks out. You know, you don't find contiguous land like that anymore. So thank you truly for your leadership on this, and I look forward to supporting this motion this evening.
I just wanted to also jump on that there's many times this came very close to falling through, and John put an extreme amount of effort into this to keep it going. I would have given up long before. So he definitely deserves some praise.
Very good. Councilor Bordelon?
Thank you, John. We also had a lot of good partners between GOSA and
Sure.
yeah, and some other folks and the rest of the team. Deb Jones was really instrumental in this, as well as Rich Cody and our town attorney's office. So it really took a full team to keep this one going. So thank you.
Very good. Councilor Bordelon?
Thank you. I think this is really exciting for the town of Groton. When's the last time we've acquired 161 acres?
I don't know of any.
I've only been here 42 years, but I have not seen, I've seen pieces of property, but not continuum property like this. So will this be the biggest property that we have as open space that we own that's not state property?
Not counting, I don't know what the schools have for their properties.
The undeveloped, though.
Yeah, undeveloped, that we own.
That we own undeveloped. That's not state property or owned by any other organization.
I don't know what our largest park is acreage-wise. I can't say off the top of my head.
The COP property is probably a larger piece than this, but I'd have to double check on that one.
Okay. So this might run about second or close there.
Right.
Yeah, so
It's a property of significance.
Yeah, this is a big deal, and I too will have to say, as a counselor, when this came before us and it went back and forth, there were times I was quite nervous because we were in the middle of COVID and looking to spend money on land. And one of the things that always guides me is once you lose land, you can't get it back. There's no more land to be gotten. And to have this is going to be a huge asset to the town of Groton, future generations to come. Not only the historical value on that land, it's a wonderful thing to have. It's also going to protect our watershed, because what, as you stated, was proposed there was going to be an apartment complex at one point. Is that correct? One of the developers at one point?
It was going to be a age-restricted housing development.
Right, and so this is wonderful, and I'm excited for this. And the value of the property, which you can't put a price tag on when you're talking about land that you cannot get back once developed. The amount that we're having to put forward is absolutely amazing for the quality of what we're going to get. So again, thank you for this, and I think this council should be very proud of the work and effort that we did to get here over the last, I don't know if it's been a year, maybe it's been a year. But it's
2 years.
Maybe 2 years, there you go, 2 years. And I look forward to renaming it and really taking this property on and seeing where it can go. And I think it will allow a lot of open space and opportunity for our community for many, many generations to come. And we as a council and everyone here should be very proud of this. This is something that we could have backed out of, and we voted to keep continuing. And it's exciting for Groton. So I'm really excited. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Renner, is this still on track to close by the end of the year?
Yes, that's the goal, and that's the message we've been communicating with that we need to close this by the end of the year.
Okay, all right, great job, and thank you for all you do in acquiring these properties. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilor Bordelon?
I just had one follow-up question. As Councilor Jones said, closing by the end of the year. I know that the taxes, and we don't acquire it, then the property owners end up having to, have a bill. Or when is that deadline that we need to close by so that we're not having to increase the amount to offset the cost of the taxes? I know that was a problem at one point when we were looking at the numbers. So when's our deadlines on that?
Yeah, so that's something that we're working with our partners on, and we may end up talking to the council about that a little bit in executive session in the future.
Okay, because I know that the property close dates and taxes can be when's our tax assessment date end for all properties?
tax assessment date? I mean,
When the bill would be
every
due.
day you own a piece.
It's July 1st, January 1st.
For when they're due, right?
Okay, all right. So is there a
But then it's
chance
still
that these?
prorated.
So is there a chance that these numbers could end up changing if, obviously we'd have to talk in executive session, but is there a chance this number could change? It would have to come before the council to be voted on again? Or is this a done deal?
There are some components that could change a little bit, depending on when the closing date is for the property. But again, I think that's something, minor funds, minor amounts, but that's something I'd rather talk about in executive session if we were going to be hitting some of those thresholds.
Okay, so there's a chance the numbers could change, is what my question was, then we can talk about them at a later date.
Slightly,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, okay, just wanted to know what the bottom number was, so, thank you.
Counselor Franco?
Thank you. I remember this coming back to us on, is this coming to us in 2020 and then on other occasions? And there was a very, at least the council at the time, there was definitely a line that was drawn that there would be no more other funds beyond the 220. And that there would be no more contribution than that. So I just wanted to remind Mr. Reiner that that's where my vote is, and that I'm letting you know ahead of time that that's my number, and I'm not willing to go above that number. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no other hands, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Carries unanimously, 9 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstaining.
Motion to adjourn?
I have a motion to
Thank you.
adjourn.
Second.
Seconded by, motion by Bordelon, second by Parker. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? We are adjourned at 10:07.